The last light of day stretched across Samuel Miller's drought-stricken farm, painting the cracked earth in hues of amber and gold. He stood at the edge of his cornfield, or what should have been a cornfield, watching as the relentless summer sun disappeared behind the distant hills. 3 months without proper rain had turned his once promising crop into brittle stalks that crumbled at the slightest touch. The farm that had been in his family for 4 generations was dying, and Samuel felt powerless to stop it. He wiped the sweat from his brow with a weathered handkerchief, his calloused fingers rough against his sunburned face. At 45, Samuel looked a decade older, his once dark hair now streaked with gray, deep lines etched around his eyes from years of squinting against the harsh elements. The weight of the farm's financial troubles pressed down on his shoulders, making each step back to the house feel like walking through mud. The screen door of the modest farmhouse creaked as he entered, the sound announcing his arrival to the empty kitchen. Since his wife Emma had passed from cancer 3 years ago, silence had become his constant companion. Their daughter Lily was away at college, the first in their family to pursue higher education. She'd offered to drop out when things got tough, but Samuel had refused. He wouldn't let his struggles rob her of her future. He poured himself a glass of water from the tap, grimacing at the metallic taste. The well was running low too. Everything was running low these days. Water, money, hope. The bank notice on the table stared back at him, the red stamp of final warning seeming to pulse with malicious intent. 2 more months before foreclosure unless he could come up with a payment. He'd sold most of the cattle already, keeping only a few chickens and his old dog Blue, who now limped to his side seeking affection. "At least you're still here, old friend," Samuel murmured, rubbing the dog's ears. Blue had been with him for 12 years, outlasting even Emma. The thought of his late wife sent a familiar ache through his chest. She would have known what to do. Emma had always been the optimist, finding silver linings in the darkest storms. As Samuel prepared a simple dinner of canned beans and toast, his neighbor's truck rumbled up the driveway. Through the window, he watched Jim Henderson step out, his lanky frame moving with purpose toward the house. Jim had been a fixture in Samuel's life since childhood, their farms adjacent for as long as anyone could remember. Unlike Samuel's struggling operation, the Henderson farm was larger and more diversified, weathering the drought with relative stability. "Evening, Sam," Jim called as he entered without knocking, a habit formed over decades of friendship. "Thought I'd stop by on my way back from town." Samuel nodded, offering a weary smile. "Coffee?" "Wouldn't say no." Jim settled into a chair at the kitchen table, removing his worn cowboy hat. "Heard from Lily lately?" "Got an email yesterday. She's doing well in her classes, psychology and something else. Words I can barely pronounce." Pride briefly lifted the cloud of worry from Samuel's features. Jim nodded approvingly. "Smart kid. Takes after Emma." The mention of his wife's name hung in the air between them, neither uncomfortable nor unwelcome, just a shared acknowledgement of loss. "You hear about the auction over in Ridgefield tomorrow?" Jim asked, changing the subject as Samuel placed a steaming mug before him. "Didn't know there was one." "Old man Jenkins is selling off everything, moving to Arizona to live with his daughter." Jim took a sip of coffee. "Thought you might want to come along. Get out of the house for a bit." Samuel's initial instinct was to decline. There was always work to be done around the farm, futile as it sometimes seemed, and he certainly had no money for purchases. But the thought of another day alone with his troubles made the invitation suddenly appealing. "Yeah, might do that," he conceded. Jim studied his friend over the rim of his mug. "How bad is it, Sam? Really?" Samuel's gaze drifted to the bank notice. There was no point in pretending with Jim. 2 months, maybe less. Can't make the payment without a miracle. Jim's weathered face creased with concern. "I could help out. A loan between friends." "No." Samuel cut him off, his pride still intact despite everything. "I appreciate it, but no. Henderson money won't save Miller land." Jim didn't push. He understood the stubborn independence that ran through farmers like lifeblood. "Well, auction starts at 10. I'll pick you up at 9. After Jim left, Samuel sat alone at the table long into the night, the bank notice seeming to mock his deliberations. Perhaps a day away would clear his head, help him see a solution he'd missed. With that thin hope, he finally retired to bed, blue settling at his feet with a contented sigh. Morning arrived with unexpected cloud cover, a brief respite from the scorching sun that had tortured the land for months. Samuel fed the chickens, checked the water trough, and was waiting on the porch when Jim's truck appeared. The drive to Ridgefield took nearly an hour, the men passing the time with comfortable conversation about weather forecasts, local politics, and memories of better harvests. As they approached the Jenkins farm, Samuel was struck by how similar it looked to his own. The same signs of struggle against unforgiving elements, the same faded hope in every dusty acre. The auction was already underway when they arrived. A modest crowd gathered around an auctioneer who rattled off prices with practiced speed. Farm equipment, furniture, tools, the accumulated possessions of a lifetime being dispersed to strangers. Samuel felt a chill at the thought that this could be his own farm in a matter of months. They wandered through the displays of items up for bid, Jim occasionally raising his hand for something useful, a set of wrenches, a nearly new chainsaw. Samuel kept his hands firmly in his pockets, there as an observer only, until he saw the horse. It stood apart from the main auction area, tethered to a fence post without shelter from the increasingly hot day. An old bay gelding, ribs visible beneath a dull coat, head hanging low as if too heavy to hold up. A handwritten sign proclaimed, "Horse as is, no bids yet." Something pulled Samuel toward the animal. As he approached, the horse raised its head slightly, revealing eyes that seemed too bright and alert for its decrepit body. There was intelligence there, and something else Samuel couldn't quite name. A dignity, perhaps, despite its circumstances. "Wouldn't waste your time," a voice said behind him. Samuel turned to find Jenkins himself, looking uncomfortable in clean clothes that suggested he'd dressed up for the auction. "That old nag came with the east pasture when I bought it 15 years ago. Never been much use except eating hay." "What's wrong with him?" Samuel asked, noting how the horse's right front leg seemed to bear less weight than the others. Jenkins shrugged. "Bad leg. Previous owner said he was some fancy show horse before he got injured. Never saw any evidence of that myself. Been trying to sell him for years, but nobody wants a lame horse pushing 20. Samuel moved closer, extending his hand slowly. The horse regarded him warily, but didn't pull away when Samuel's fingers gently touched its nose. Up close, he could see scars along its flanks, testament to some past hardship. "No takers at all?" Samuel heard himself asking, though he had no practical reason for interest. "Thought about sending him to the glue factory," Jenkins said matter-of-factly, "but the wife wouldn't hear of it. Got too soft a heart, that woman. Horse'll probably end up being donated to some rescue if nobody bids. Hate to just give him away, though." Samuel nodded, continuing to stroke the horse's nose. There was something about the animal that resonated with him, perhaps a shared sense of being past their prime, of facing an uncertain future. "What's his name?" Samuel asked. Jenkins looked surprised at the question. "Called him Old Boy. Don't know what his real name was before I got him." Old Boy. It seemed a sad reduction for a creature that must have had a proper name once, an identity beyond its current state of neglect. "Sam," Jim's voice carried across the yard. "Found some irrigation pipes that might interest you." Samuel gave the horse a final pat and turned away. He had no business thinking about a horse, especially one with no useful function on a failing farm. It was nothing but sentimentality, a luxury he couldn't afford. Yet throughout the auction, his thoughts kept returning to Old Boy, standing alone in the heat. During a lull in the proceedings, Samuel found himself back at the fence, offering the horse water from his own bottle, which it accepted with surprising gentleness. "Seems to like you," Jenkins observed, appearing at his side again. Samuel shrugged. "Animals can sense kindness, that's all." "Tell you what," Jenkins said, lowering his voice. Auction's almost over. Make me an offer and he's yours. Anything's better than nothing at this point. The rational part of Samuel's brain screamed at him to walk away. Another mouth to feed was the last thing he needed, but something else, something that felt strangely like Emma's voice, whispered that sometimes value couldn't be measured in practical terms. $50, Samuel said, naming the only sum he could possibly spare. Jenkins hesitated only briefly before nodding. Done. I'll throw in his old halter and lead rope. And just like that, Samuel Miller, a man on the brink of losing everything, became the owner of a lame, aging horse that no one else wanted. Jim was incredulous when Samuel told him, "Have you lost your mind? What are you going to do with a broken-down horse?" Samuel had no good answer. Couldn't just leave him there. Jim shook his head but helped load Old Boy into his stock trailer without further comment. The horse entered cautiously, favoring his right front leg, but showed no resistance. The drive back was quieter than the journey out, Samuel questioning his own judgment with every mile. The money he'd spent was meant for the electric bill. He'd have to figure something out when they got home. As they pulled into his driveway, Samuel glanced back at the trailer. Through the slats, he could see Old Boy standing steadily despite the movement of the vehicle. For a brief moment, their eyes met, and Samuel felt a curious certainty that somehow this impulsive purchase had been the right decision. Blue barked a greeting as they exited the truck, then approached the trailer with cautious curiosity as Samuel lowered the ramp. Old Boy descended slowly, his hooves making dull thuds on the wood. Once on solid ground, the horse looked around at his new surroundings with alert interest, his ears forward for perhaps the first time that day. "Let's get him some water," Samuel said, leading the horse toward the barn. It was a modest structure, housing a few pieces of equipment and feed for the chickens. There was an old stall that hadn't been used since Samuel had sold his last riding horse years ago, when Emma first got sick. Old Boy drank deeply from the water trough, then allowed himself to be led into the stall. Samuel spread fresh straw, grateful he still had a few bales left. The horse watched his every move, those intelligent eyes never leaving Samuel's face. "Well, Old Boy," Samuel said, feeling slightly foolish for talking to the horse, "it's not much, but it's home now, for however long that might be." As if in response, the horse stretched his neck forward and gently bumped Samuel's shoulder with his nose. The gesture, surprisingly affectionate from an animal who had no reason to trust humans, caught Samuel off guard. For the first time in months, perhaps years, he felt a small spark of something like hope. He didn't yet know that this broken horse would change everything, or that beneath the scarred exterior and favored leg lay a secret that would alter the course of his future. All Samuel knew was that for $50, he had purchased a moment of purpose in a life that had been drifting toward despair. And for now, that seemed enough. Dawn broke over the farm with tentative rays of sunlight filtering through the clouds. Samuel woke with a start, momentarily disoriented by the sound that had pulled him from sleep, a soft nickering coming from the barn. The events of the previous day rushed back to him, and he groaned, wondering if his moment of compassion would prove to be yet another misstep in a long line of poor decisions. Blue lifted his head from the foot of the bed, ears perked at the unfamiliar sound. "That's right," Samuel muttered to the dog. "We've got a horse now, as if we didn't have enough problems." He dressed quickly and made his way to the barn, Blue trotting at his heels. The morning air was cool against his face, a brief reprieve before the heat would set in. As he approached the barn door, Samuel prepared himself for the reality of what he'd done, $50 spent on a useless animal when every cent was precious. Old Boy was standing alert in his stall, ears forward as Samuel entered. The horse nickered again, a greeting that seemed almost cheerful. In the morning light, Samuel could better assess his purchase. The animal was indeed thin, his coat dull and in need of grooming, but there was a brightness in his eyes that belied his worn appearance. "Good morning to you too," Samuel said, approaching the stall. "Let's see what we're working with here." He opened the stall door cautiously, half expecting the horse to bolt or show signs of aggression. Instead, Old Boy remained calm, watching Samuel with what almost seemed like curiosity. As Samuel ran his hands along the horse's body, he could feel each rib, evidence of neglect rather than any inherent health issue. The scarring along the flanks was old, the fur grown back in patches of white against the bay coat. When he reached the right front leg, Samuel knelt to examine it more closely. Old Boy shifted his weight but allowed the inspection. The leg was noticeably different from the others. Not deformed, but there was a long raised scar running down the cannon bone. An old injury, professionally treated from the look of it, but one that had clearly never healed perfectly. "Someone spent good money trying to fix you up," Samuel murmured, gently feeling along the scar tissue. "You must have been worth it once." Rising, he patted the horse's neck and was rewarded with another gentle bump from Old Boy's nose. Despite himself, Samuel smiled. There was something endearing about this broken-down animal's apparent gratitude. "Well, you need food, and I need coffee," he said. "Let's see what we can do about both." Samuel led Old Boy out to the small paddock adjacent to the barn. It wasn't much, a quarter-acre of sparse grass surrounded by weathered fence posts. But it was secure and would give the horse some freedom to move. Old Boy stepped gingerly onto the grass, his limp more pronounced as he navigated the uneven ground. But there was an eagerness in his movement that suggested he hadn't enjoyed such liberty in some time. After filling a water trough and providing what little hay he could spare, Samuel headed back to the house, his mind already calculating the additional expense this horse would represent. He'd need to buy proper feed, perhaps call the local vet to look at that leg, costs he couldn't afford, for a horse he didn't need. Yet as he sipped his coffee on the porch, watching Old Boy cautiously explore the paddock, Samuel couldn't bring himself to regret his decision. There was something about seeing life on his property again, something beyond the utilitarian presence of the chickens. The horse moved with a deliberate grace despite his impairment, his ears constantly swiveling to catch every sound. The ringing of his cell phone interrupted Samuel's observations. Lily's name flashed on the screen, sending a warm rush through him. His daughter called regularly, but each time felt like a gift. "Morning, sweetheart," he answered, trying to keep the weariness out of his voice. "Dad, you sound better today." Lily's voice came through clear and bright. "How's everything?" Samuel hesitated. He never shared the full extent of his struggles with Lily, not wanting to burden her with worries she couldn't solve from hundreds of miles away. "Oh, same as always. Dry as a bone out here." "Any rain in the forecast?" "They're promising some next week, but you know how that goes." He paused, then added, "Actually, I did something impulsive yesterday." "You? Impulsive?" Lily's laugh was light and teasing. "This I've got to hear. I bought a horse." The silence on the other end lasted so long that Samuel checked to make sure the call hadn't dropped. Finally, Lily spoke, her tone a mixture of confusion and concern. "A horse? But I thought... after we sold Daisy when Mom got sick, you said you'd never..." "I know what I said." Samuel watched as Old Boy lowered himself carefully to the ground, stretching out in a patch of sunlight. "This is different. He's an old gelding, lame in one leg. Nobody wanted him. So you, with all your financial problems that you think I don't know about, decided to take on a special needs horse." There was no judgment in Lily's voice, only a soft understanding that made Samuel's throat tighten. "Your mother would have done the same," he said simply. Lily was quiet for a moment. "Yes, she would have." "What's his name?" "Previous owner called him Old Boy, but that doesn't seem right." "Definitely not," Lily agreed. "He needs a proper name. What does he look like?" Samuel described the horse, the bay coat dulled by neglect, the intelligent eyes, the dignified way he carried himself despite his injury. As he spoke, he realized how closely he'd already observed the animal in the short time they'd been acquainted. "He sounds like a warrior who's seen better days," Lily mused. "How about Trojan? Or maybe Phoenix, rising from the ashes?" Samuel considered these suggestions, watching as the horse raised his head to look directly at him across the yard, as if aware he was being discussed. "I'll think about it. Might just come to me once I get to know him better." They chatted for a while longer about Lily's classes and her part-time job at the campus library. Samuel soaked in every detail of her life, picturing her in the environment she described, taking pride in how well she was adapting to college life. When they finally said goodbye, with promises to talk again soon, Samuel felt the familiar mix of joy and loneliness that always followed their conversations. Setting his empty coffee mug aside, he decided to put his unexpected new responsibility to practical use. The paddock fence needed repairs in several places, and having the horse there made the task seem more purposeful than it had when the enclosure stood empty. Samuel gathered his tools and set to work, aware of Old Boy watching him with apparent interest. As the morning progressed, Samuel found himself talking to the horse, explaining what he was doing as he replaced rotted boards and tightened loose wire. It felt good to speak aloud after so many silent days. Old Boy would occasionally whinny in response, creating an illusion of conversation that Samuel found oddly comforting. Around noon, the rumble of an approaching vehicle drew Samuel's attention. Jim's truck appeared at the end of the driveway, raising a cloud of dust as it made its way toward the house. Samuel set down his hammer and walked over to meet his friend. "Came to see if you'd come to your senses yet," Jim said by way of greeting, nodding toward Old Boy. "Or if you needed help dropping that animal off at the rescue center." Samuel leaned against the fence post. "We're doing fine, as you can see." Jim studied the horse, who had risen to his feet and was watching them with alert interest. He does look a bit better today. Less like he's about to keel over anyway." "Amazing what a little care can do," Samuel replied, unable to keep a hint of defensiveness from his tone. Jim raised his hands in surrender. "Hey, I'm not criticizing. Just checking in on my friend who suddenly decided to adopt the sorriest-looking horse in the county." Samuel's posture relaxed. "I appreciate it, really. But I think we're going to stick together, Old Boy and I." "Old Boy? That's a terrible name." "Working on a better one." Jim nodded, then reached into his truck and pulled out a bag. "Brought you some proper horse feed. Figured you might not have any on hand." The simple gesture of kindness caught Samuel off guard. "Jim, you didn't have to." "Neighbors help neighbors," Jim cut him off. "Besides, think of it as a housewarming gift for your new friend there." Samuel accepted the bag with genuine gratitude. It would save him a trip to the feed store and stretch his meager funds a little further. "Thanks. He'll appreciate it." After Jim left, promising to check in again soon, Samuel prepared a proper meal for Old Boy using the feed his friend had brought. As he approached the paddock with the bucket, the horse limped over eagerly, his earlier lethargy replaced by an almost youthful enthusiasm. "Hungry, are you?" Samuel said, pouring the feed into a trough. "Can't blame you. Probably been a while since you had the good stuff." Old Boy ate with gusto, occasionally looking up at Samuel as if to express his appreciation. When he finished, the horse nudged Samuel's chest with his nose, more forcefully than before. There was a surprising strength in the gesture that made Samuel step back and really look at the animal before him. Beneath the neglect, there were signs of quality that Samuel hadn't fully registered before. The broad chest, the well-proportioned head, the fine lines of his legs despite the injury to one. This wasn't just some random farm horse. There was breeding here. Purpose. Curiosity piqued, Samuel ran his hand along Old Boy's neck, brushing aside the tangled mane. It was then that he noticed something he'd overlooked during his earlier examination. A small area where the hair pattern seemed different, as if something had once been branded or tattooed there, but had faded with time. Frowning, Samuel fetched a brush from the barn and began to groom the horse methodically. Old Boy stood perfectly still for the procedure, seeming to enjoy the attention. As layers of dirt and loose hair were removed, the bay coat began to show hints of its original luster. But it was when Samuel reached the inside of the horse's right thigh that he made a discovery that stopped him cold. There, partially obscured by dirt and hair, was a distinct mark, not a random scar or blemish, but a deliberate series of numbers and letters tattooed into the skin. Samuel brushed the area more carefully, revealing the full marking, TB7249GS. Samuel wasn't an expert on horse identification, but he knew enough to recognize what this might be, a thoroughbred registration number. The implications began to dawn on him slowly. This wasn't just any old farm horse that had outlived its usefulness. This animal had a documented lineage, a recorded history, perhaps even a name that wasn't Old Boy. His heart beating faster, Samuel completed the grooming, noting other signs that had been hidden beneath the grime. The refined head, the strong, well-shaped hooves, despite the lack of proper care, the proud arch of the neck that became more evident as the horse relaxed under his ministrations. By late afternoon, the transformation was remarkable. While still thin and favoring his injured leg, Old Boy now looked like a shadow of something greater, a hint of former glory beneath the ravages of neglect and time. Samuel stood back, brush in hand, a plan forming in his mind. "You've been hiding something, haven't you?" he said softly to the horse, who gazed back at him with those intelligent eyes. "Well, tomorrow we're going to find out exactly what that is." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the paddock, Samuel made a decision. Whatever this horse had been, whatever his story was, Samuel was now part of it. And perhaps, just perhaps, that connection would lead somewhere neither of them could yet imagine. The following morning, Samuel was up before sunrise, his mind buzzing with questions about the mysterious tattoo. After tending to the chickens and making sure Old Boy had water and feed, he sat at the kitchen table with his laptop, an ancient thing that groaned to life with reluctant determination. The internet connection on the farm was spotty at best, but today he needed it to work. He typed "thoroughbred tattoo identification" into the search bar and waited as the results slowly populated the screen. The first few links led to articles explaining the tattooing system used by the Jockey Club to identify registered thoroughbreds. According to what he read, the letters TB confirmed his suspicion. This was indeed a thoroughbred horse, not some random farm animal as Jenkins had claimed. Samuel clicked on a link to the thoroughbred registry database, only to find that accessing records required membership credentials and fees he couldn't afford. Frustration mounting, he tried several other approaches before closing the laptop with a sigh. The internet alone wouldn't provide the answers he sought. After a moment's consideration, he reached for his phone and dialed a number he hadn't called in years. "Greenfield Veterinary Clinic, how can I help you?" a cheerful voice answered. "Is Dr. Reynolds available? This is Samuel Miller." There was a brief pause. "Samuel Miller from the old Miller farm. Hold on, I'll get her." A few moments later, a warm, familiar voice came on the line. "Sam, I haven't heard from you since, well, it's been a while." Dr. Catherine Reynolds had been Emma's friend before she became the local large animal veterinarian. After Emma's passing, Samuel had withdrawn from many social connections, including Catherine. The horse he'd owned then had been sold, eliminating the need for her professional services as well. "Hello, Catherine," he said, suddenly aware of how isolating grief had made him. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." "Nothing that can't wait a minute. What can I do for you?" Samuel explained about Old Boy, the auction, and his discovery of the tattoo. As he spoke, he realized how implausible it all sounded. A broke farmer impulsively buying a lame horse that might have a mysterious past. Catherine listened without interruption. When he finished, her response was immediate and practical. "I have appointments until 4, but I could stop by on my way home. No charge," she added before he could object. "Consider it professional curiosity." Relief washed over him. "I'd appreciate that. Thank you." After hanging up, Samuel returned to the barn with a new sense of purpose. If Old Boy was going to be examined by a professional, he deserved to look his best. Samuel spent the next hour continuing the grooming he'd begun the day before, carefully working through tangles in the mane and tail, cleaning hooves, and speaking softly to the horse throughout the process. Under his attentions, more details emerged. A small, star-shaped white mark on the horse's forehead, that had been obscured by dirt. The distinctive dappling along his flanks that became visible as dust was brushed away. With each revelation, Samuel's curiosity about the animal's history deepened. Old Boy seemed to respond to the care, standing patiently for procedures that must have been routine for him once, long ago. There was a trust developing between them, a quiet understanding that transcended words. "Who were you?" Samuel murmured as he worked. "And how did you end up abandoned at Jenkins' place?" Around noon, the distant sound of a vehicle prompted Samuel to look up from his task. A battered pickup truck he didn't recognize was making its way up the driveway. He set down the brush and walked out to meet the unexpected visitor, wondering if it might be someone from the bank making an unscheduled inspection. Instead, a petite woman in her 60s emerged from the truck, her silver hair cut in a practical bob, her movements spry despite her age. Samuel recognized her immediately as Margaret Wilson, who ran the small town's only library. "Ms. Wilson?" he said, confused by her presence. "Can I help you with something?" She smiled, the expression lighting up her weathered face. "Jim Henderson mentioned you'd acquired a horse with a mysterious past. I thought I might be of assistance." Samuel blinked in surprise. News traveled fast in small towns, but this seemed exceptional even by local standards. "That was just yesterday afternoon. Jim stopped by the library this morning for his weekly mystery novels," she explained. "He knows I used to work as a racing secretary at Belmont Park before I retired here. When he described the tattoo you found, I thought I might be able to help identify your new friend." The revelation that the seemingly ordinary librarian had a background in horse racing caught Samuel off guard. "I didn't know you worked in racing. You never mentioned it." "You never asked," she replied simply. "Now, may I see this horse of yours?" Samuel led her to the paddock where Old Boy was now grazing on the sparse offerings. The horse lifted his head at their approach, ears forward with interest. Margaret's eyes widened as she took in the animal before her. She moved closer to the fence, her gaze sweeping over Old Boy with an expert's assessment. "My goodness," she breathed. "Even in this condition, you can see the quality." Samuel nodded, pleased that someone else recognized what he'd begun to suspect. "The tattoo is on his inner thigh. Would you like to see it?" "If he'll allow it." Samuel entered the paddock and approached Old Boy, who came to meet him without hesitation. "This is Margaret," he told the horse, feeling only slightly foolish for making introductions. "She might know something about your past." He led the horse to the fence where Margaret waited. With gentle hands, Samuel lifted the right hind leg slightly and turned it to expose the inner thigh where the tattoo was located. Old Boy stood calmly, accepting the manipulation with remarkable trust. Margaret leaned in, squinting to make out the faded marks. "TB7249GS, she read aloud, her voice taking on a reverent quality. "Oh my, but it couldn't be." "What is it?" Samuel asked, carefully setting down the horse's leg. Margaret straightened, her expression a mixture of disbelief and excitement. "I need to confirm, but if this is who I think it is..." She trailed off, shaking her head. "I have some old racing journals at home. Let me do some research before I say more. I wouldn't want to get your hopes up unnecessarily." Samuel wanted to press for details, but the look on Margaret's face told him she needed to be certain before sharing her suspicions. "All right. When will you know?" "Give me until tomorrow. I'll call you as soon as I find something concrete." She reached out to stroke Old Boy's nose, which the horse accepted with dignity. "You, sir, are either a ghost or a miracle. I'm not sure which yet." After Margaret left, promising to return with information, Samuel found himself even more intrigued by the horse's mysterious identity. The way she had reacted suggested Old Boy might be more than just any registered thoroughbred. There was recognition there, specific and personal. The remainder of the afternoon passed with Samuel alternating between farm chores and spending time with the horse. He found himself talking more freely now, sharing thoughts and concerns he hadn't voiced aloud in years. "The bank's breathing down my neck," he told Old Boy as he checked the horse's injured leg. 2 more months, then this place goes to auction. Not much different from where I found you, I suppose." The horse nickered softly, pressing his nose against Samuel's shoulder in what felt remarkably like a gesture of comfort. "Maybe I should have a tattoo put on my thigh," Samuel joked weakly. "Might turn out I'm worth something too." At 4:30, Dr. Catherine Reynolds's SUV pulled into the driveway, the vehicle marked with the Greenfield Veterinary Clinic logo. Samuel went to greet her, suddenly self-conscious about the state of the farm. Catherine had been here many times in the past, when things were better kept, when Emma was alive, and the land was productive. Catherine stepped out, dressed in practical work clothes, her auburn hair streaked with gray and pulled back in a ponytail. At 50, she had the confident bearing of someone comfortable in her own skin. Her smile was genuine, but held a hint of sadness that Samuel attributed to the memories this place must hold for her too. "Sam," she said warmly, extending her hand. "It's been too long." He shook her hand, noting the strength in her grip. "Thanks for coming. I appreciate it. Let's see this mystery horse of yours." Samuel led her to the paddock where Old Boy was waiting, almost as if he knew a visitor was coming. Catherine approached slowly, her experienced eyes taking in every detail of the animal before her. Unlike Margaret's reaction of surprise, Catherine's was one of professional assessment, tempered with growing concern. "Oh, Sam," she said softly. "What happened to this poor fellow?" "That's what I'm trying to figure out." Catherine entered the paddock, moving with the practiced confidence of someone who had worked with horses all her life. Old Boy watched her approach, ears alert but showing no signs of fear. She spoke to him in low, soothing tones as she began her examination, starting with his eyes and working her way systematically through a complete checkup. When she reached the injured leg, she knelt for a closer look, her fingers gently probing the scar tissue. "This was a significant injury," she said. "Looks like a fracture that was surgically repaired. High-quality work, too, the kind of treatment that costs thousands." "Why would someone spend that kind of money and then abandon him?" Samuel asked. Catherine shook her head. "Racing can be a cruel business. If he couldn't perform afterward, he might have been sold off, passed from owner to owner until he ended up with Jenkins." She continued her examination, checking his teeth next. "He's about 18, I'd say. Not 20 like Jenkins told you." Finally, she examined the tattoo, her expression growing thoughtful. "I'm not as versed in racing pedigrees as I used to be, but I can make some calls if you want to trace this." "Margaret Wilson is already looking into it," Samuel explained. "She used to work at Belmont Park." Catherine's eyebrows rose. "Our librarian? I had no idea. Neither did I until today." She nodded, completing her examination with a general assessment of Old Boy's condition. "He's undernourished, but not dangerously so. The leg will always give him trouble, but with proper care and gentle exercise, he could live comfortably for many more years." She fixed Samuel with a direct look. "That said, he'll need regular care, good feed, possibly supplements. Can you manage that, Sam? Financially, I mean?" The question stung, though he knew it was fair. "I'll figure something out." Catherine's expression softened. "I know you will. You always do." She reached into her bag and pulled out several items: a large tub of liniment for the horse's leg, some supplements, and a bag of specialized feed. "Consider this a welcome gift for your new friend. I'll write down instructions for his care." "Catherine, I can't accept—" "Yes, you can." She cut him off firmly. "Emma would never forgive me if I didn't help." The mention of his late wife brought a lump to Samuel's throat. He nodded, unable to speak for a moment. Catherine seemed to understand. She busied herself with writing care instructions, giving him time to compose himself. When she finished, she handed him the paper and gathered her things. "Call me if you notice any changes in his condition," she said. "And Sam, it's good to see you taking an interest in something again." After she left, Samuel stood in the paddock with Old Boy, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. The horse stood beside him, their shoulders almost touching, two beings finding comfort in each other's presence. "Big day for you," Samuel said. "Two visitors, a proper medical checkup, and someone who might know who you really are." Old Boy nickered softly, as if in agreement. "Tomorrow," Samuel promised, "we might learn your real name." The thought filled him with an anticipation he hadn't felt in years, a reason to look forward to the coming day with something other than dread. Whatever the horse's past might hold, it had already given Samuel an unexpected gift: purpose. Samuel woke before his alarm, his mind still cycling through possibilities about Old Boy's mysterious past. He'd slept fitfully, dreams filled with racetracks and cheering crowds, images his subconscious had conjured from Margaret's reaction to the tattoo. Dawn was just breaking as he made his way to the barn, eager to check on the horse that had so unexpectedly become the center of his thoughts. Old Boy greeted him with a soft nicker, already standing alert at the stall door. Samuel was struck by how different the horse looked after just 2 days of proper care. His eyes were brighter, his posture more erect, as if some essential dignity was gradually being restored. "Morning," Samuel said, offering his palm for the horse to sniff. "Feeling better today, are we?" He followed Catherine's instructions meticulously, applying liniment to the scarred leg and mixing the supplements into the morning feed. As he worked, he continued the one-sided conversation that had become their routine. "Margaret should be calling today. Then we'll know who you really are." He paused, realizing how much he'd come to care about the answer. "Not that it changes anything. You're staying here regardless." After finishing with Old Boy, Samuel completed his regular farm chores with unusual energy. The mystery had invigorated him, providing a focus beyond the daily struggle to keep his failing farm afloat. Even the bank notice seemed less threatening this morning, though its deadline remained unchanged. He was clearing debris from a drainage ditch when his phone rang shortly after 10. Margaret Wilson's name flashed on the screen. "Hello?" he answered, wiping sweat from his brow. "Samuel, it's Margaret. I've found something significant. May I come over? This isn't information I want to share over the phone." Her tone sent a ripple of anticipation through him. "Of course. I'm here all day. I'll be there in 30 minutes. True to her word, Margaret's truck appeared precisely half an hour later. This time, she wasn't alone. Jim Henderson sat beside her, and in the back seat was another man Samuel didn't recognize, tall and distinguished-looking with silver hair and an expensive-looking jacket that seemed out of place in their rural setting. Samuel watched them approach with growing curiosity, Blue circling his legs with matching interest in the newcomers. "Sam," Jim nodded in greeting. "Hope you don't mind me tagging along. When Margaret told me what she'd found, well, I thought you might want a friend here." Something in Jim's tone set off a warning bell in Samuel's mind. Whatever Margaret had discovered, it was significant enough to warrant moral support. "This is Walter Crane," Margaret introduced the stranger. He was the racing manager at Stone Ridge Farms for over 20 years before he retired here. "When I realized who your horse might be, I asked Walter to confirm." The silver-haired man stepped forward, extending his hand. "Mr. Miller, I understand you've acquired a bay thoroughbred with the tattoo TB7249GS? Samuel shook his hand, noting the firm grip and appraising gaze. "That's right. He's in the paddock. Would you like to see him?" "Very much so," Walter replied, his composed demeanor barely containing what seemed like eager anticipation. Samuel led the group to the paddock where Old Boy was grazing. The horse raised his head at their approach, ears forward with interest. When Walter Crane came into view, the animal went completely still, his entire body tensing as if in recognition. "My God," Walter breathed, his professional composure cracking. "It really is him." Old Boy took a hesitant step forward, then another, his gaze fixed on Walter. When he reached the fence, he stretched his neck out, nostrils flaring as he took in the man's scent. "Hello, old friend," Walter said softly, reaching out to stroke the horse's nose. "It's been a long time." Samuel looked between the man and horse, the connection between them undeniable. "You know him." Walter nodded, his eyes never leaving the animal before him. "I more than know him, Mr. Miller. I raised him from a foal. This is Golden Spirit, winner of the Kentucky Derby and Preakness Stakes 8 years ago. He was one of the greatest racehorses of his generation." The name hit Samuel like a physical blow. Golden Spirit. Even he, with his limited knowledge of horse racing, had heard that name. A champion whose disappearance from racing had been as sudden as his rise to fame. That's not possible," Samuel stammered. "This can't be Golden Spirit. He was worth millions." Margaret stepped forward, opening a folder she'd been carrying. "I thought the same thing, but the evidence is conclusive. I've brought racing records, photographs, and registration documents that confirm it." She handed Samuel a photograph showing a magnificent bay thoroughbred crossing a finish line, a jockey in gold and black silks raised in triumph on his back. Despite the difference in condition, the resemblance was unmistakable. The same star-shaped mark on the forehead, the same proud arch of the neck. "But how did he end up at Jenkins's farm?" Samuel asked, still struggling to process the revelation. Walter's expression darkened. "That's what I'd very much like to know. Golden Spirit was injured during training for the Breeders' Cup, a hairline fracture to his right front cannon bone. The surgery was successful, but he'd never race again. The last I knew, he was sold to a breeding farm in Kentucky for a substantial sum. That was 6 years ago." Jim, who had been quietly observing, spoke up. "And somehow he ended up abandoned at an old farm in our county, passed off as a worthless nag." "There's more," Margaret said, her voice taking on an edge of excitement. "Golden Spirit wasn't just any champion. His bloodline is exceptional. His grandsire was Northern Dancer, and his dam was a daughter of Secretariat. His stud fee was set at $150,000 per breeding." Samuel nearly choked at the figure. "Per breeding?" Walter nodded grimly. "Which makes his presence here all the more baffling. Even with the injury, he should have lived out his days in comfort as a valuable breeding stallion." He paused, studying the horse more closely. "Except, he's not a stallion anymore, is he?" Samuel shook his head, the implications suddenly clear. "Jenkins said he was gelded when he got him." A look of profound sadness crossed Walter's face. "That explains it. Someone gelded him, destroying his breeding value. After that, he would have been worthless to the commercial breeding operation that purchased him." The cruelty of it struck Samuel deeply. A champion reduced to worthlessness with a single irreversible procedure, then discarded like trash when he no longer served a purpose. "But why?" Samuel asked. "Why would anyone do that to such a valuable animal?" Walter's expression hardened. "Insurance fraud would be my guess. Buy the horse as a breeding stallion, insure him for millions, then have him accidentally gelded. Collect the insurance, then quietly dispose of the now worthless animal. It's happened before in the industry." "That's monstrous," Margaret whispered. "It's also highly illegal," Walter added. "If that's what happened, someone committed serious fraud." Samuel looked at Golden Spirit, the name now replacing Old Boy in his mind, with new understanding. The horse gazed back, his intelligent eyes seeming to acknowledge that his secret was finally revealed. "What happens now?" Samuel asked cautiously, a knot forming in his stomach. If this horse was truly the famous Golden Spirit, there would be people with legal claims to him, people with the resources to take him away. Walter straightened his jacket, his expression carefully neutral. "That depends on you, Mr. Miller. Legally, Golden Spirit was sold to you by Mr. Jenkins, who had possessed him for years. Your bill of sale, however modest, gives you legitimate ownership." Relief washed through Samuel, followed immediately by confusion. "But if there was fraud involved, wouldn't the previous owners or the insurance company have a claim?" "Perhaps," Walter conceded. "But pursuing such a claim would mean admitting they had lost track of a champion thoroughbred for years, raising uncomfortable questions about their due diligence and animal welfare practices. Not to mention the statute of limitations on certain claims may have expired." Jim stepped closer to Samuel. "What Walter's saying is that you have options, Sam. This isn't just any horse anymore." The implications began to dawn on Samuel. Golden Spirit was more than just a rescued animal. He was living history, a champion whose disappearance had been a mystery in racing circles. That had value beyond mere sentimentality. "I need to think," Samuel said, feeling overwhelmed by the sudden complexity of what had seemed a simple act of compassion. "Of course," Walter replied, "but there's something else you should know." He reached into his jacket and removed a business card, handing it to Samuel. "I currently serve as a consultant for several racing publications and documentary filmmakers. Golden Spirit's story, his disappearance, survival, and rediscovery, would be of tremendous interest. There could be financial opportunities for you as his legal owner." The suggestion hung in the air, neither pushed nor dismissed. Samuel tucked the card into his pocket, his gaze returning to the horse, to Golden Spirit, who stood watching the humans decide his fate. "Thank you all for this information," Samuel said finally. "I appreciate you tracking down the truth." Walter nodded, his eyes lingering on Golden Spirit with unmistakable emotion. "He was something special, Mr. Miller. I never thought I'd see him again." He paused, seeming to choose his next words carefully. "Whatever you decide, may I visit him occasionally? I was there when he was foaled, watched his first wobbly steps." The request touched Samuel unexpectedly. "Of course. Anytime." After Walter and Margaret departed, with promises to provide copies of all the documentation they'd gathered, Jim stayed behind. He leaned against the fence beside Samuel, both men watching Golden Spirit as he returned to grazing, seemingly unaware of his rediscovered fame. "You know what this means, don't you?" Jim said after a lengthy silence. "That I bought a Kentucky Derby winner for $50? Jim chuckled. "That, and the fact that you might have just found a way out of your financial troubles." Walter wasn't exaggerating about the interest this story would generate. Exclusive interviews, book rights, maybe even a film option. People love comeback stories, especially ones involving animals. Samuel considered this. The bank notice still sat on his kitchen table, the foreclosure date unchanged. Could Golden Spirit's remarkable story truly be his salvation as well? "I didn't rescue him to profit from him," Samuel said quietly. "No, you rescued him because you're a decent man who couldn't leave an animal to suffer," Jim replied. "But that doesn't mean you can't accept the good fortune that's come from it. Think about it. You could save the farm, keep Lily in college without worry, and give Golden Spirit the retirement he deserves. Put that way, it seemed almost too perfect." Samuel had learned long ago that when things seemed too good to be true, they usually were. "I'll think about it," he promised, though uncertainty gnawed at him. As Jim drove away, Samuel remained with Golden Spirit, processing the morning's revelations. The horse, no longer nameless, no longer without history, approached and gently pressed his nose against Samuel's chest. "Golden Spirit," Samuel said, testing the name aloud. It suited him, acknowledging both his prestigious past and the resilient spirit that had helped him survive years of neglect. "So, you're a celebrity," he told the horse with a small smile. "How does it feel to be famous again?" Golden Spirit merely blinked, the afternoon sun catching in his eyes and reflecting back golden flecks that seemed to give new meaning to his name. The day after Golden Spirit's true identity was revealed, Samuel woke to the sound of vehicles approaching his farm. Peering through the bedroom window, he counted 3 cars making their way up the dusty driveway, none of which he recognized. With a groan, he dressed quickly and hurried outside, Blue trailing after him with suspicious barks. The first car, a sleek silver sedan, carried Walter Crane and Margaret Wilson. Behind them was Jim in his pickup truck, looking apologetic. The third vehicle, a glossy SUV with a local news station logo emblazoned on the side, was the one that made Samuel's stomach tighten. "I'm sorry, Sam," Jim said as he climbed out of his truck. "Word got out about Golden Spirit. I tried to call, but you weren't answering." Samuel patted his pockets, realizing he'd left his phone on the charger. "What's happening, Jim?" Walter approached, his expression a mixture of excitement and contrition. I may have mentioned Golden Spirit's rediscovery to a former colleague. I didn't expect it to spread so quickly. From the news vehicle emerged a woman in a crisp blazer and a young man carrying a camera. The reporter spotted Samuel and made a beeline for him, her professional smile already in place. "Mr. Miller? Diane Roberts, Channel 8 News. We understand you've made an extraordinary discovery. Could we ask you a few questions about Golden Spirit?" Samuel felt like a deer caught in headlights. His instinct was to refuse, to protect the quiet life he'd established, to shield Golden Spirit from becoming a spectacle. But then he thought of the bank notice, of Lily's tuition, of the crumbling farm around him. "I need a moment," he managed, turning to Jim with a look that clearly said, "Help me." Jim stepped in smoothly. "Folks, Mr. Miller wasn't expecting visitors today. Why don't we give him a little time to prepare? Maybe come back this afternoon?" The reporter looked disappointed, but nodded professionally. "Of course. We'll return at 2 if that works. This is quite a story, Mr. Miller. Our viewers would love to hear it." After they retreated to their vehicle, Samuel rounded on Walter and Margaret. "How did this happen?" Walter had the grace to look embarrassed. "Racing circles are small, Samuel. News travels fast, especially news this remarkable. Golden Spirit wasn't just any champion. His disappearance was a mystery that many in the industry never forgot." Margaret nodded, her expression earnest. "I've already received calls from 3 racing journalists seeking confirmation. The story's out there now." Samuel ran a hand through his hair, frustration warring with a reluctant understanding. Of course, people would be interested. A Kentucky Derby winner, presumed lost to the industry, suddenly rediscovered on a struggling farm? It was the kind of story people loved. "What should I do?" he asked, the question directed at no one in particular. "That depends on what you want," Jim replied. "You could refuse interviews, try to keep things private. Or you could embrace it, tell your side of the story. There's interest now, which means there's opportunity." Walter cleared his throat. "I've also had a call from Brandon Hayes." The name caught Samuel's attention. "The documentary filmmaker? The one who made that series about Secretariat?" "The very same. He's interested in Golden Spirit's story. Very interested. He mentioned a potential advance for exclusive rights." Samuel felt as if the ground beneath him was shifting. Yesterday, he had been a failing farmer with an abandoned horse. Today, he was being offered money for a story he was still processing himself. "I need to check on Golden Spirit," he said, needing space to think. He found the horse in the paddock, peaceful and unaware of the commotion his identity had stirred. Golden Spirit lifted his head at Samuel's approach, nickering softly in greeting. Samuel leaned against the fence, his thoughts in turmoil. "What do you think of all this?" he asked the horse. "You're famous again. People want to see you, hear about you." Golden Spirit simply gazed at him with those intelligent eyes, offering no judgment. Jim joined him at the fence a moment later. "For what it's worth, I think you should consider the opportunities here. Not just for yourself, but for him." He nodded toward Golden Spirit. "His story deserves to be told. What happened to him was wrong, and bringing that to light might prevent it happening to other horses." Samuel had to admit Jim had a point. There was justice in exposing the fraud that had reduced a champion to an abandoned nag, and the practical side of him couldn't ignore the potential financial benefits. "If I do this, talk to reporters, maybe work with this documentary maker, I want conditions," Samuel said finally. "Golden Spirit stays here. No one disrupts his routine or stresses him for the sake of a better shot. And I want control over how his story is told." Jim smiled, squeezing his friend's shoulder. "That sounds reasonable to me. Let's go tell them." By afternoon, Samuel's quiet farm had transformed into an impromptu media center. The local news crew had returned as promised, and 2 more had joined them after hearing the story. Walter had called Brandon Hayes, who expressed eagerness to meet Samuel and Golden Spirit as soon as possible. Samuel, with coaching from Jim, gave his first interview standing beside Golden Spirit in the paddock. He kept it simple, explaining how he'd purchased the horse at auction, discovered the tattoo, and learned of his true identity. The cameras lingered lovingly on Golden Spirit, who seemed to sense the importance of the occasion, standing proudly despite his still thin frame and scarred leg. "What are your plans for him now?" Diane Roberts asked, microphone extended toward Samuel. "He'll stay here," Samuel answered without hesitation. "This is his home now. He's earned a peaceful retirement." "And what about the allegations of fraud? The suggestion that someone deliberately gelded him to collect insurance money?" Samuel glanced at Walter, who stood off camera. "Those are serious claims that will need to be investigated by the proper authorities. All I know is that this horse deserved better than being abandoned, and I intend to make sure the rest of his life is comfortable and dignified." The words came naturally, surprising Samuel with their conviction. In speaking them aloud, he realized how deeply he meant them. Whatever opportunities arose from Golden Spirit's rediscovery, the horse's welfare would remain his priority. As the day progressed, more visitors arrived. Curious neighbors, local horse enthusiasts, even the town mayor, sensing a potential boost for the community. Golden Spirit handled the attention with remarkable composure, as if remembering a time when crowds and cameras were commonplace in his life. By evening, when the last of the visitors had departed with promises to return, Samuel was exhausted. He sat on the porch steps, watching as the setting sun cast long shadows across the farm. The bank notice still sat on his kitchen table, but for the first time in months, it didn't feel like an immovable obstacle. His phone buzzed with a text from Lily. "Dad, Golden Spirit is trending online. Call me." He smiled, imagining his daughter's excitement. She had always loved horses, taking riding lessons until Emma's illness forced them to economize. He made a mental note to call her after he'd had a chance to decompress. Catherine Reynolds's SUV pulled up just as dusk was settling in. She stepped out, shaking her head in amazement. "I hear my patient is a celebrity," she said, approaching the porch. "The whole town's talking about it. Golden Spirit, back from the dead." Samuel gestured to the step beside him, and she sat down, their shoulders nearly touching. "It's been a circus today," he admitted. "I'm not sure I'm cut out for this kind of attention." "How's he handling it?" "Better than I am. He seems to remember what it was like to be in the spotlight." Catherine nodded thoughtfully. Horses have remarkable memories, especially for experiences tied to strong emotions. His racing days would have been full of adrenaline, excitement. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment before Catherine spoke again. "I came by to check on him, but also to warn you. Not everyone in the racing world will be happy about this story coming to light. If there was fraud involved, powerful people could be implicated." The warning sent a chill through Samuel. In his relief at the potential financial salvation Golden Spirit represented, he hadn't fully considered the darker implications. "You think there could be trouble? I think you should be careful. Document everything. Make copies of all the evidence Margaret and Walter have gathered. And maybe consider security cameras for the barn." Samuel turned to study her face in the fading light. "You're serious?" "I've worked with enough racehorse owners to know that where there's big money, there can be big trouble." She stood, brushing dust from her jeans. "Just be cautious, Sam. That's all I'm saying." After checking Golden Spirit one last time, Catherine left with a promise to return in a few days. Her warning lingered in Samuel's mind as he completed his evening chores, casting wary glances toward the darkening road beyond his property. Inside the house, he finally called Lily, who answered on the first ring. "Dad, why didn't you tell me? I had to find out from my roommate who saw it on social media." Samuel explained the whirlwind of the past few days, from discovering the tattoo to the media attention that had followed the revelation of Golden Spirit's identity. "This is amazing," Lily said when he finished. "Do you realize what this means? The farm could be saved." "It's looking that way," Samuel admitted, "though I'm trying not to count on anything yet. I want to meet him. Can I come home this weekend?" The eagerness in her voice warmed his heart. "I'd like that. He'd like that too, I think." After saying goodnight to Lily, Samuel sat at his kitchen table. Walter's business card in one hand, the bank notice in the other. The contrast between them was stark, one representing the threat that had hung over him for months, the other a potential path to salvation. Yet Catherine's warning echoed in his thoughts. If Golden Spirit's story threatened powerful interests, there could be consequences he hadn't anticipated. The simple act of compassion that had led him to purchase an unwanted horse had cascaded into something far more complex. He tucked both items into a drawer and went to bed, his dreams filled with racing crowds and shadowy figures watching from the periphery. In one vivid sequence, he stood in a winner's circle beside Golden Spirit, not as the broken-down horse he'd rescued, but as the champion he once was, powerful and gleaming in the sun. The dream shifted suddenly to darkness, with unseen threats circling ever closer, and Samuel woke with a start, his heart pounding. He lay awake for a long time, listening to the night sounds of the farm, wondering what the coming days would bring, and whether the light of Golden Spirit's rediscovered glory would ultimately prove to be a blessing or a curse. By Friday morning, 3 days after Golden Spirit's identity had been revealed, Samuel's quiet farm had become something of a local attraction. He'd been forced to put up a simple sign at the end of his driveway: "Visitors by appointment only." Even with this deterrent, curious onlookers occasionally drove by slowly, hoping for a glimpse of the famous horse. The story had spread far beyond their small town. Regional news outlets had picked up the local coverage, and several national horse racing publications had reached out for interviews. Walter, acting as an unofficial advisor, helped Samuel navigate the sudden attention, screening requests and offering guidance on which opportunities might be worth pursuing. Brandon Hayes, the documentary filmmaker, was scheduled to visit the following week. He had already offered a substantial sum for exclusive rights to Golden Spirit's story, money that could potentially save the farm from foreclosure. Samuel had asked Walter to negotiate terms that would ensure Golden Spirit's welfare remained the priority throughout filming. Amidst this whirlwind, Samuel maintained his daily routine with Golden Spirit, finding peace in the simple acts of feeding, grooming, and caring for the horse. These quiet moments stood in stark contrast to the chaos that surrounded them. Golden Spirit seemed to understand, offering a calming presence when Samuel's nerves frayed from another phone call or unexpected visitor. That morning, Samuel was in the paddock with Golden Spirit when his phone rang. The caller ID showed an unfamiliar number with a Kentucky area code. "Hello?" he answered cautiously. "Is this Samuel Miller?" The voice was male, cultured, with a hint of southern drawl. "Yes, it is. Mr. Miller, my name is Harrison Caldwell. I'm the CEO of Stone Ridge Farms in Kentucky." The name sparked immediate recognition. Walter had mentioned Stone Ridge as Golden Spirit's birthplace and original racing stable. "I understand you've come into possession of a horse we once owned," Caldwell continued, his tone carefully neutral. "A thoroughbred named Golden Spirit." Samuel's grip tightened on his phone. "That's correct. I'd like to discuss this situation with you. Perhaps we could meet? I'll be in your area early next week on business." The timing seemed too convenient to be coincidental. Samuel chose his words carefully. "What exactly would we be discussing, Mr. Caldwell?" There was a slight pause before Caldwell answered. "Primarily, I'd like to verify that the horse is indeed Golden Spirit. If so, we have a vested interest in his welfare and future. Golden Spirit's identity has been confirmed by multiple racing experts," Samuel replied. "As for his welfare, he's receiving excellent care here." "I'm sure he is." Caldwell's tone remained pleasant, but Samuel detected an edge beneath the politeness. "Nevertheless, I'd like to see him for myself, and perhaps discuss a mutually beneficial arrangement." A chill ran down Samuel's spine. "What kind of arrangement?" "I believe this conversation would be better in person. Shall we say Tuesday morning? I could come to your farm." Samuel thought of Catherine's warning about powerful interests being threatened by Golden Spirit's rediscovery. Was this such a threat, or a genuine inquiry from the horse's former owner? "Tuesday morning would be fine," Samuel said finally. 10 o'clock. "Excellent. I look forward to meeting you, Mr. Miller." After hanging up, Samuel immediately called Walter to relay the conversation. Walter's response was measured but concerned. "Harrison Caldwell is one of the most influential figures in thoroughbred racing," he explained. "Stoneridge Farms has produced numerous champions over the decades. Caldwell himself comes from old Kentucky money and has connections throughout the industry. Should I be worried about this visit?" Walter hesitated. "Let's just say you should be prepared. Caldwell might be simply curious, or he might have ulterior motives. Either way, I'd suggest having witnesses present for your meeting. I'd be happy to be there, if you'd like." Samuel accepted the offer gratefully, then spent the rest of the morning distracted by thoughts of what Caldwell might want. Golden Spirit seemed to sense his unease, staying close as Samuel worked around the paddock, occasionally nudging him as if to say, "I'm still here." Around noon, the sound of tires on gravel announced another arrival. This time, Samuel smiled at the sight of Lily's small blue sedan coming up the driveway. She had driven straight from college, eager to meet Golden Spirit and spend the weekend at home. Samuel felt a rush of pride as his daughter stepped out of the car. At 20, Lily had her mother's delicate features and his own determined chin. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her eyes, so like Emma's, lit up when she saw him. "Dad," she called, rushing to embrace him. "I can't believe all this is happening." Samuel hugged her tightly, realizing how much he'd missed her presence. "It's been quite a week." "Where is he?" she asked eagerly, looking toward the paddock. "Where's Golden Spirit?" Samuel led her to where the horse was grazing. Golden Spirit raised his head at their approach, ears forward with interest at the new visitor. Lily approached the fence slowly, her expression a mixture of awe and tenderness. "He's beautiful," she whispered. "Even after everything he's been through, you can see what he once was. Would you like to meet him properly?" Samuel asked, opening the paddock gate. Lily nodded, following her father's lead. Golden Spirit watched them approach, his posture alert but relaxed. Samuel showed her how to offer her hand, palm flat, letting the horse catch her scent before attempting to touch him. Golden Spirit stretched his neck forward, nostrils flaring as he sniffed Lily's hand. After a moment's consideration, he gently pressed his nose into her palm. Lily's smile was radiant. "He likes you," Samuel said, though the words were unnecessary. The connection was evident in the way Golden Spirit's eyes softened, as Lily carefully stroked his neck. "I've been reading all about him," Lily said. "Watching videos of his races online. Dad, he was incredible. The way he moved, like he was flying instead of running." Samuel nodded, seeing Golden Spirit through new eyes as Lily described his racing career. He'd watched some footage himself, marveling at the transformation from the powerful athlete on screen to the damaged but dignified creature before him. "What happens now?" Lily asked as they walked back to the house. "With the documentary and everything?" Samuel explained the developments of the past few days, the media interest, Brandon Hayes' offer, and now Harrison Caldwell's impending visit. Lily frowned at the mention of Caldwell. "Do you think he wants to buy Golden Spirit back?" "I don't know." Walter seemed concerned about his intentions. "You're not going to sell him, are you?" The worry in Lily's voice reflected her quick attachment to the horse. "No," Samuel said firmly. "Golden Spirit stays here. That's non-negotiable." They spent the afternoon catching up, with Lily sharing stories from college and Samuel filling her in on the farm's struggles before Golden Spirit's arrival. It felt good to talk openly about the financial problems he'd tried to shield her from. Lily listened with a maturity that reminded him she wasn't a child anymore, but a young woman capable of understanding complex situations. "I could take a semester off," she offered as they prepared dinner together. "Come home and help with the farm and Golden Spirit, especially with all this media attention." "Absolutely not," Samuel replied, though he was touched by the offer. "Your education comes first, always." "Mom would say the same thing," Lily said with a small smile. "She'd be proud of you, you know, for saving Golden Spirit, for not giving up on the farm." The mention of Emma brought the familiar ache, but it was softened by Lily's presence and the truth of her words. Emma would have approved of Golden Spirit's rescue, would have been the first to insist they give the abandoned champion a home. After dinner, Samuel received an email from Brandon Hayes confirming his visit for Monday afternoon. Attached was a preliminary contract for the documentary rights, with terms that were surprisingly favorable: a substantial upfront payment, creative control provisions, and explicit protections for Golden Spirit's welfare during filming. "This could really save the farm," Lily said, reading over his shoulder, "and tell Golden Spirit's story the right way." Samuel nodded, though Catherine's warning still echoed in his mind. What if sharing this story stirred up more trouble than they were prepared to handle? Saturday morning brought another unexpected development. As Samuel and Lily were having breakfast, Jim arrived with news that made them both pause mid-bite. "Jenkins was found dead last night," he said without preamble. "Apparent heart attack, according to Sheriff Matthews. His wife found him in the barn." Samuel set down his coffee mug slowly. "That's unfortunate." He had no particular affection for Jenkins, but the man's death was still a shock. "Timing's odd, don't you think?" Jim continued, accepting the cup Lily offered him. "Right after Golden Spirit becomes big news." "You think there's a connection?" Samuel asked, a knot forming in his stomach. Jim shrugged. Jenkins was no spring chicken, and his health wasn't great. Could be completely natural, but given what we suspect about Golden Spirit's past. He left the implication hanging. Lily looked between them, her expression troubled. If someone deliberately destroyed Golden Spirit's value through gelding, then abandoned him to hide the evidence of fraud, they might not want Jenkins talking about where he got the horse or who sold him. The observation was astute and disturbing. Samuel hadn't considered that Jenkins might have been silenced, but it wasn't beyond the realm of possibility. The old farmer might have known more than he'd revealed about Golden Spirit's journey from champion to cast-off. "I'm going to call Catherine," Samuel decided, "and Walter. They should know about this." Both Catherine and Walter expressed concern about Jenkins's death, with Walter promising to make some discreet inquiries within his racing connections. Catherine repeated her earlier warning about security measures, emphasizing that Samuel should be particularly cautious about Harrison Caldwell's visit. The rest of the weekend passed in a strange mixture of joy and tension. Lily's presence brightened the farm, and she spent hours with Golden Spirit, establishing a bond that grew visibly stronger with each interaction. Together they created a makeshift memory board in the kitchen, pinning up printouts of Golden Spirit's racing photos, newspaper clippings, and a timeline of his known history. Yet beneath this pleasant surface ran an undercurrent of unease. Samuel installed simple security cameras Jim had brought over, positioning them to monitor the barn and paddock areas. He found himself checking on Golden Spirit more frequently, especially at night, and startling at unfamiliar sounds. Sunday evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in vivid oranges and purples, Lily voiced what they had both been feeling. "We're in the middle of something bigger than we realized, aren't we, Dad?" Samuel nodded slowly, his gaze on Golden Spirit grazing peacefully in the distance. "I think we are. What started as a simple act of kindness has turned into, I'm not sure what." "A mystery," Lily suggested. "A quest for justice, maybe." "Or just a complicated mess," Samuel said with a wry smile. Lily leaned her head against his shoulder, a gesture reminiscent of her childhood. "Well, whatever it is, we're in it together now. You, me, and Golden Spirit." As darkness settled over the farm, Samuel took comfort in that simple truth. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Brandon Hayes' documentary, Harrison Caldwell's mysterious agenda, the implications of Jenkins's timely death, they would face them as a family, strengthened by the unexpected bond with a horse that had once known glory and might yet find it again, though in a very different form. Monday morning arrived with a sense of anticipation that permeated the farm. Lily had planned to return to college that afternoon but decided to postpone her departure until Wednesday, unwilling to miss Brandon Hayes' visit or Harrison Caldwell's mysterious agenda. Samuel was grateful for her continued presence. Her sharp insights and unwavering support had become invaluable as they navigated these unfamiliar waters. Golden Spirit seemed to sense the importance of the day, carrying himself with particular dignity as Samuel and Lily groomed him after breakfast. His coat, though still not returned to its racing glory, now held a soft sheen that hinted at his pedigree. The regular feeding and care had begun to fill out his frame, making the once protruding ribs less visible. "He knows he's going to be on camera," Lily joked, brushing the horse's mane until it fell in a smooth cascade down his neck. "Look at him posing." Indeed, Golden Spirit stood with his head held high, his eyes alert and intelligent. Samuel couldn't help but wonder if the horse remembered the spotlight, the cameras that had once documented his racing triumphs. "Do you think he misses it?" Samuel asked. "The racing? The attention?" Lily considered this, her hands moving rhythmically with the brush. "I think animals live more in the present than we do. But he seems to understand when people recognize him, when they treat him with respect. Maybe that's what he missed during those years with Jenkins, being seen for who he truly is." The observation struck Samuel as remarkably insightful. Wasn't that what all beings wanted in the end? To be seen, to be valued for their true nature rather than for their utility. Shortly after noon, a silver SUV pulled into the driveway. Brandon Hayes emerged, younger than Samuel had expected, perhaps in his early 40s, with an energetic stride and the focused gaze of someone accustomed to framing the world through a camera lens. He was accompanied by a woman who introduced herself as Olivia Chen, his producer. "Mr. Miller," Hayes said, extending his hand. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with us. This is quite a story you've stumbled into." Samuel shook Hayes' hand, finding the filmmaker's grip firm and his smile genuine. "I'm still trying to wrap my head around it myself. This is my daughter, Lily." Pleasantries exchanged, they walked toward the paddock where Golden Spirit waited. Hayes stopped short when he first caught sight of the horse, a look of reverence crossing his features. "Remarkable," he breathed. "Even after everything he's been through, you can see the champion in him." "That's exactly what I said," Lily exclaimed, warming immediately to the filmmaker. Hayes approached the fence slowly, studying Golden Spirit with professional appreciation. "I followed his career closely. That Kentucky Derby win was one for the ages, coming from behind in the final stretch, looking like he was flying rather than running." Golden Spirit, as if recognizing the praise, walked deliberately to the fence. Despite his lingering limp, there was a power and grace to his movement that captivated all who watched. "May I?" Hayes asked, gesturing toward the gate. Samuel nodded, and they entered the paddock together. Golden Spirit regarded the newcomers with intelligent curiosity, allowing Hayes to approach with appropriate caution. The filmmaker didn't attempt to touch the horse immediately, instead standing quietly, allowing Golden Spirit to make the first move. After a moment's consideration, the horse stretched his neck forward, nostrils flaring as he took in Hayes' scent. Something in that inspection must have been satisfactory, for Golden Spirit then gently nudged Hayes' shoulder, the same gesture of acceptance he had first shown Samuel. "He approves," Samuel said with a small smile. Hayes looked genuinely moved by the interaction. "I've worked with many animals over the years, but there's something special about him. An awareness, a presence." They spent the next hour discussing Hayes' vision for the documentary. He wanted to tell Golden Spirit's complete story, from his celebrated racing career through his mysterious disappearance and eventual rediscovery. The film would explore themes of resilience, second chances, and the bond between humans and animals. "We'll need to fill in the missing pieces," Hayes explained as they sat at Samuel's kitchen table, reviewing the proposed production schedule. "The years between his sale to the breeding farm and his appearance at Jenkins' property. That's where the real mystery lies." Olivia nodded, her expression serious. "We've already begun researching. The breeding farm that purchased Golden Spirit after his injury was Bluegrass Bloodstock. They reported him as having died from complications following a routine procedure about a year after acquiring him. But clearly he didn't die, Lily said, frowning. Exactly, Hayes confirmed, which means someone falsified records, and if an insurance claim was filed, he left the implication hanging. Samuel thought of Jenkins' sudden death and felt a chill. You're talking about serious fraud. Potentially millions of dollars, Olivia added. We'll need to tread carefully with this aspect of the story. There are powerful interests involved. The conversation shifted to practical matters, filming schedules, interviews with racing experts including Walter, and the careful approach needed to document Golden Spirit without causing him stress. By the end of their meeting, Samuel felt confident in Hayes' integrity and commitment to telling the story respectfully. The contract was finalized, with Samuel signing the papers that granted exclusive documentary rights to Hayes' production company. The substantial check that would follow would be enough to settle the bank's demands and keep the farm operational for the foreseeable future. As Hayes and Olivia prepared to leave, the filmmaker paused for one last look at Golden Spirit. There's something almost mythic about this story, Mr. Miller. A fallen champion, forgotten and discarded, finding his way to someone who recognized his worth not for what he could do, but simply for who he is. The words stayed with Samuel long after Hayes' departure, echoing in his mind as he and Lily prepared for the next day's more uncertain meeting with Harrison Caldwell. That evening, as the sun set in a blaze of crimson and gold, Samuel noticed a dark sedan driving slowly past the farm, the driver's face obscured behind tinted windows. The vehicle continued down the road without stopping, but Samuel made note of it, his unease growing. Third unfamiliar car today, Lily observed from the porch. Someone's watching the farm. Samuel nodded grimly. Jim's coming over early tomorrow to be here when Caldwell arrives. Walter too. Good, Lily said. I don't trust this Caldwell person. If Stoneridge was Golden Spirit's original owner, they must have known something about what happened to him after his injury. We don't know that Stoneridge was involved in whatever fraud took place, Samuel cautioned, though he shared her suspicion. Maybe not directly, Lily conceded. But in the racing world Golden Spirit moved in, people talk. Someone at Stoneridge must have heard rumors at least. Their conversation was interrupted by the ringing of Samuel's phone. The caller ID showed Walter's name. Samuel. Walter's voice held an urgency that immediately put him on alert. I've been making some inquiries about Harrison Caldwell and Stoneridge Farms. There's something you should know before tomorrow's meeting. What is it? Stoneridge filed an insurance claim for Golden Spirit approximately 7 years ago. The claim stated that he died following complications from colic surgery, about a year after they'd sold him to Bluegrass Bloodstock. Samuel frowned. But Stoneridge didn't own him anymore. Why would they file a claim? That's the interesting part. Apparently, when they sold Golden Spirit to Bluegrass, they retained a mortality insurance policy on him. This isn't uncommon in high-value horse transactions. It's a way of protecting investment interests. But it means Stoneridge collected a significant sum when Golden Spirit was reported dead. The implications landed heavily. So if fraud was committed, Stoneridge benefited financially, Walter confirmed. I can't say whether Caldwell was personally involved, but as CEO, he would have approved the claim at some level. Samuel thanked Walter for the information and relayed it to Lily, whose expression darkened as she processed this new revelation. He's not coming here out of concern for Golden Spirit, she said flatly. He's coming to protect himself and his company. Probably, Samuel agreed. The question is, how far will he go to do that? They took extra precautions that night, securing the barn and activating the rudimentary security system Jim had helped install. Samuel found himself checking the cameras repeatedly before finally retiring to bed, his sleep fitful and punctuated by dreams of shadowy figures approaching the farm. Tuesday morning dawned clear and cool, a deceptive serenity masking the tension that had settled over the Miller farm. Jim arrived shortly after breakfast, followed by Walter, both men greeting Samuel with the gruff solidarity of those preparing for an uncertain confrontation. Golden Spirit seemed to sense the atmosphere, standing alert in his paddock, his gaze frequently turning toward the driveway, as if anticipating the visitor who would soon arrive. At precisely 10 o'clock, a gleaming black luxury car with tinted windows pulled up to the house. The vehicle Samuel had noticed driving by the previous evening. From it emerged Harrison Caldwell, tall, distinguished, in his early 60s, wearing an expensive suit that seemed wildly out of place in the rural setting. He was accompanied by a younger man carrying a briefcase, introduced simply as Mr. Peterson, my legal advisor. Mr. Miller, Caldwell extended his hand, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. Thank you for agreeing to meet with me. I see Walter Crane is here as well. It's been some time, Walter. Harrison, Walter acknowledged with a curt nod. The tension between the two men was palpable. They moved to the porch where Lily had set up chairs and a pitcher of iced tea, hospitality offered despite their wariness. Caldwell's gaze swept over the modest farmhouse, the fields beyond, and finally settled on the paddock where Golden Spirit stood watching. So, Caldwell said after taking a perfunctory sip of tea, I understand you believe you found Golden Spirit. Samuel bristled at the phrasing. There's no belief involved. He has been positively identified by multiple experts, including Walter here, who knew him from birth. Caldwell's smile tightened. Of course, I meant no offense. It's just that, well, this situation is highly unusual. Golden Spirit was reported deceased several years ago. Yes, Walter interjected, by Bluegrass Bloodstock, after purchasing him from Stone Ridge. Interestingly, Stone Ridge maintained a mortality insurance policy and collected on it when he was reported dead. A flicker of something, annoyance, concern, crossed Caldwell's face before his smooth mask returned. Standard business practice in high-value transactions. But I'm not here to discuss insurance policies. I'm here because Stone Ridge Farms has a legitimate interest in Golden Spirit's welfare and legacy. What exactly do you want, Mr. Caldwell? Samuel asked directly. Caldwell set down his glass. To verify the horse's identity for myself, and to make you an offer. What kind of offer? A generous one. Stone Ridge would like to purchase Golden Spirit and provide him with an appropriate retirement at our Kentucky facility. He would receive the best care, be showcased to visitors as the champion he was, and live out his days in the comfort he deserves. Samuel's jaw tightened. He's not for sale. Mr. Miller. Caldwell leaned forward, his voice taking on a persuasive tone. I understand you've developed an attachment to the animal. But surely you can see that a working farm like yours isn't the ideal setting for a horse of Golden Spirit's caliber and needs. His needs are being met, Samuel replied firmly. He has proper care, regular veterinary attention, and a peaceful environment. What he doesn't need is to be uprooted again. Caldwell's expression hardened slightly. I'm prepared to offer you $100,000. That's substantially more than a gelded, lame horse is worth, even one with Golden Spirit's history. The sum was significant, more than enough to secure the farm's future. Yet Samuel didn't hesitate. As I said, he's not for sale, at any price. Mr. Peterson cleared his throat. Mr. Miller, my client is being exceedingly generous. If the horse is indeed Golden Spirit, there could be legal questions regarding the chain of ownership. A lengthy court battle would benefit no one. Is that a threat? Jim spoke up for the first time, his normally affable demeanor replaced by cold anger. Not at all, Caldwell said smoothly. Simply a statement of fact. Legal complications could arise, and I'm offering a clean solution that benefits everyone. Everyone except Golden Spirit, Lily said, her voice steady despite her obvious indignation. Who was abandoned once already after being deliberately gelded to commit fraud. Fraud that benefited Stone Ridge Farms. Caldwell's composure slipped momentarily, his eyes flashing with irritation. That's a serious accusation, young lady, and one without evidence. We're gathering evidence for the documentary, Samuel said, watching Caldwell's reaction carefully. Brandon Hayes is quite thorough in his research. The mention of the documentary seemed to catch Caldwell off guard. He exchanged a glance with Peterson before regaining his composure. I see. Well, perhaps we should all take some time to consider our positions. May I at least see the horse before I leave, to confirm his identity for myself?" Samuel hesitated, then nodded. He led the group to the paddock, maintaining a protective stance as Caldwell approached Golden Spirit. The horse's reaction was immediate and startling. He backed away, ears flattened, nostrils flaring in what appeared to be recognition tinged with fear. "He remembers you," Walter observed quietly. "And not fondly, it seems." Caldwell's face remained impassive, though a muscle twitched in his jaw. "Horses have long memories," he said simply. He studied Golden Spirit for another moment, then turned back to Samuel. "There's no doubt about his identity. I'll be in touch, Mr. Miller. My offer stands for now, but I suggest you consider it carefully before proceeding with any documentary projects." As the black car disappeared down the driveway, the tension that had built during the visit slowly dissipated, leaving behind a residue of unease and a clearer understanding of what they were facing. "He's worried," Walter said, watching the dust settle on the road. "Very worried about what might come to light." Samuel nodded, his resolve strengthening. Then we're on the right track. The days following Caldwell's visit brought a flurry of activity to the Miller farm. Brandon Hayes wasted no time in beginning production on his documentary, sending a small crew to film preliminary footage of Golden Spirit and conduct interviews with Samuel, Lily, and Walter. The atmosphere was one of cautious optimism. The documentary contract had been finalized, with the first payment already deposited in Samuel's bank account, enough to satisfy the mortgage and grant a temporary reprieve from financial pressure. Yet beneath this positive development ran an undercurrent of apprehension. Caldwell's thinly veiled threats had not been idle. 3 days after his visit, Samuel received a formal letter from Stonebridge Farms' legal team, questioning the alleged identification of Golden Spirit and suggesting that further investigation into the chain of ownership might be necessary. Walter, reviewing the letter at Samuel's kitchen table, shook his head grimly. "Intimidation tactics. They're hoping you'll decide Golden Spirit isn't worth the trouble and accept their offer." "It won't work," Samuel said, his resolve hardening with each passing day. "I'm not selling him." Golden Spirit, oblivious to the legal maneuvering surrounding him, continued to thrive under Samuel and Lily's care. His coat had developed a healthy shine, his frame filling out with proper nutrition. Even his injured leg seemed to trouble him less, though he would always have a distinctive limp. Dr. Reynolds, visiting weekly to monitor his progress, marveled at his transformation. "He's a testament to what good care and genuine affection can do," she told Samuel during her Friday checkup. "Animals know when they're valued as individuals rather than commodities." Lily had reluctantly returned to college, extracting promises from her father to call immediately if anything concerning happened. She video chatted daily, always asking to see Golden Spirit, who seemed to recognize her voice coming from Samuel's phone, perking up his ears and moving closer to the screen. "He misses you," Samuel told her during one such call. "I miss him too," Lily replied, her expression wistful. "Both of you. I've been doing some research of my own. Did you know Golden Spirit had a half-brother who disappeared around the same time? Another horse from Stoneridge's breeding program?" This was news to Samuel. "No, Hayes hasn't mentioned that. I found it in some old racing forums. The half-brother was less successful but still valuable for breeding. He vanished from the records around the same time Golden Spirit supposedly died. You think there's a connection? Maybe. I've emailed the information to Brandon Hayes. He said his team would look into it." The documentary research was indeed progressing rapidly. Hayes had assembled a team of investigators with experience in both journalism and the racing industry. They were systematically tracking Golden Spirit's journey, interviewing former stable hands, veterinarians, and racing officials who had known the horse during his glory days. Most significantly, they had located a former employee of Bluegrass Bloodstock, the breeding farm that had purchased Golden Spirit after his racing injury, who was willing to speak on camera. Samuel received regular updates from Hayes, each revealing another piece of the puzzle. The former employee claims Golden Spirit was deliberately gelded against the farm owner's orders, Hayes explained during a phone call. Apparently, it happened while the owner was away on business. When he returned and discovered what had been done, There was a massive argument with the farm manager, who was fired immediately afterward. So the owner wasn't part of the fraud? Samuel asked. It doesn't appear so. In fact, he was devastated. Golden Spirit represented a massive investment. We're trying to locate him now for an interview, but he sold the farm years ago and seems to have dropped out of the racing world entirely. This information aligned with what Walter had suspected, that someone had orchestrated Golden Spirit's death and subsequent disappearance to collect insurance money. The question remained, how deeply was Stoneridge Farms, and specifically Harrison Caldwell, involved in the scheme? The answer began to emerge the following week when Hayes' team made a breakthrough. The fired manager from Bluegrass Bloodstock was tracked down to a small town in Arizona. Initially reluctant to speak, he finally agreed to an interview after being assured that multiple sources had already corroborated parts of the story. Hayes forwarded Samuel a transcript of the interview that left him stunned. According to the manager, the order to geld Golden Spirit had come directly from Harrison Caldwell himself. Caldwell approached me privately, the manager stated in the interview. Said there was good money in it for me if I'd make sure Golden Spirit couldn't breed. The stallion wasn't performing as expected. Some of the first mares bred to him weren't conceiving. Caldwell had maintained that mortality insurance policy, and he stood to collect millions if the horse died or became worthless for breeding. And you agreed? The interviewer asked. I'm not proud of it. But yes, I had gambling debts, and Caldwell knew it. He paid me $50,000 to have the procedure done and tell the owner it was a medical emergency. When the owner found out the truth, he fired me on the spot, as he should have. What happened to Golden Spirit after that? The owner was ruined financially. He'd leveraged everything to buy that horse. When Golden Spirit couldn't breed, the investment was worthless. Caldwell swooped in with an offer to take the problem off his hands. The plan was to report Golden Spirit as having died and collect the insurance. I assumed they'd euthanize him afterward, but I guess Caldwell found it more profitable to sell him off quietly. The manager went on to describe how Jenkins, the farmer who had eventually sold Golden Spirit to Samuel, was a distant cousin of Caldwell's longtime stable manager at Stoneridge. The connection was tenuous but significant. Golden Spirit had been passed along through personal relationships, keeping the deception contained among a small circle of individuals with vested interests in maintaining silence. Samuel shared this information with Walter and Jim, the three men sitting in Samuel's living room as a spring storm rattled the windows. Blue lay at Samuel's feet, while the security cameras displayed a peaceful view of Golden Spirit in his stall, sheltered from the rain. This is damning evidence, Walter said, his expression grave. If Hayes includes this in his documentary, Caldwell could face serious fraud charges, not to mention potential criminal charges for conspiracy. No wonder he's so desperate to get Golden Spirit back, Jim added. The horse is living proof of the fraud. And evidence that could send him to prison, Samuel concluded. Which makes our situation more dangerous than I thought. As if to confirm his words, Samuel's phone rang. The caller ID showed Hayes' number. Samuel, we've had a security breach at our production office, Hayes said without preamble, his voice tense. Someone broke in last night and specifically targeted our files on Golden Spirit. They took hard drives, equipment, and all our physical documentation. Samuel's blood ran cold. Was anyone hurt? No, thankfully. But this wasn't a random break-in. They knew exactly what they were looking for. The police? Are investigating, but I'm not optimistic. We had backups of most materials off-site, but this is clearly an escalation. I wanted to warn you to be extra vigilant. If they came after our evidence, they might come after the living evidence too, Samuel finished, his gaze moving to the security monitor where Golden Spirit stood peacefully in his stall, unaware of the danger circling around him. After hanging up, Samuel relayed Hayes' news to Walter and Jim. Jim immediately stood, pulling his truck keys from his pocket. I'm staying here tonight. No arguments, Sam. I'll sleep in the barn if I have to. Walter nodded in agreement. I'll make some calls. I know a few retired security professionals who might be willing to help out. In the meantime, don't leave Golden Spirit alone, even for a minute. The storm intensified as evening fell. Sheets of rain pounding against the roof and wind howling through the trees surrounding the property. Samuel found the weather oddly fitting, a physical manifestation of the turbulence that had engulfed his life since discovering Golden Spirit's true identity. Jim insisted on taking the first watch in the barn, settling into a makeshift bed of hay bales near Golden Spirit's stall. Samuel, after checking all doors and windows in the house, retreated to his bedroom with Blue at his side, though he doubted sleep would come easily. Around midnight, a sharp bark from Blue jolted Samuel awake. The dog stood at the bedroom door, hackles raised, emitting a low growl unlike his usual warning for routine disturbances like raccoons or deer. Samuel reached for his phone, pulling up the security camera feed. The barn appeared undisturbed, with Jim visible in one corner, apparently asleep despite his intentions to keep watch. Golden Spirit was moving restlessly in his stall, head raised, ears pricked forward, alert to something the cameras couldn't detect. Blue barked again, more urgently. Samuel slipped out of bed, grabbing the shotgun he kept in his closet. He'd never had to use it for anything more threatening than scaring off coyotes, but tonight felt different. Moving to the window, he peered through the rain-streaked glass. At first, he saw nothing beyond the curtain of water illuminated by the yard light. Then, a movement caught his eye, a dark figure making its way along the tree line that bordered the property, heading toward the barn. Samuel's heart hammered in his chest. He dialed Jim's number, watching on the camera as his friend startled awake at the ringtone. "Jim, someone's outside, heading toward the barn from the north side. I'm calling the sheriff." "On it," Jim replied, instantly alert. On the camera feed, Samuel watched him move to Golden Spirit's stall, speaking soothingly to the agitated horse. Samuel's next call was to the county sheriff's office, reporting a potential intruder. The dispatcher promised to send deputies immediately, but the farm's remote location meant it would take at least 15 minutes for help to arrive. Too long, Samuel thought, watching as a second figure emerged from the trees to join the first. He pulled on boots and a raincoat, his decision made. Blue followed at his heels, tense and ready. The rain hit him like a physical force as he stepped onto the porch, the wind driving it sideways into his face. Visibility was poor, but he could make out the barn about 50 yards away, the security light creating a halo in the downpour. Samuel moved carefully across the muddy yard, shotgun ready, Blue advancing slightly ahead. The dog suddenly stopped, growling at something Samuel couldn't yet see. Then, through the curtain of rain, he spotted them. Two figures in dark clothing attempting to pry open the barn's side door. "Hey!" Samuel shouted above the storm. "Get away from there!" The figures turned, momentarily frozen in surprise. One raised what looked like a flashlight, but the metallic glint in the security light revealed it to be something far more dangerous. A gunshot cracked through the night, the sound partially muffled by the storm. Samuel felt something whiz past his head, too close for comfort. He dropped to one knee, raising his shotgun in response. "I've called the sheriff," he yelled, hoping to deter further violence. "Deputies are on their way." The warning had little effect. The armed figure took aim again, while the second intruder continued working on the barn door. Samuel, with no choice left, fired a warning shot into the air. The sound was thunderous, momentarily drowning out even the storm. Inside the barn, Golden Spirit's frightened whinny pierced the night. The sound seemed to galvanize the intruders, who abandoned their attempt at the door and began retreating toward the trees, firing two more wild shots in Samuel's direction. Blue barked ferociously, wanting to give chase, but Samuel held him back. "Stay, boy. Let them go." The figures disappeared into the darkness beyond the security light's reach. Samuel remained where he was, rain soaking through his clothes, until he heard the distant wail of approaching sirens. Only then did he lower the shotgun, his hands trembling with fading adrenaline and the dawning realization of how close he'd come to serious harm. Inside the barn, Jim had managed to calm Golden Spirit, though the horse remained on edge, sensing the danger that had nearly reached him. As Samuel entered, dripping wet and shaken, the horse stretched his neck over the stall door, nickering softly as if in gratitude or concern. "It's all right," Samuel assured him, running a wet hand along the horse's nose. "They're gone. You're safe." But even as he spoke the words, Samuel wondered how long that safety would last, and what desperate measures Caldwell might take next to silence the living evidence of his crimes. By dawn, the storm had passed, leaving behind a sodden landscape and a tangible sense of violated security. Sheriff's deputies had arrived shortly after the confrontation, taking statements from Samuel and Jim, photographing evidence of the attempted break-in, and collecting the shell casings left behind by the intruders. They promised increased patrols in the area, but made no guarantees about catching the perpetrators. The rain had washed away footprints and other potential evidence, leaving little for investigators to work with. "You should consider moving the horse to a more secure location," suggested the lead deputy, a weathered man named Harkins who had known Samuel for years. "At least until this situation resolves itself." Samuel shook his head firmly. "This is his home now. I won't uproot him again." "Your call," Harkins replied with a shrug. "But these folks seem pretty determined. I'd beef up security if I were you." Jim had already made several calls before the deputies departed. By mid-morning, 2 retired security professionals, friends of Walter's, arrived to assess the farm's vulnerabilities. Samuel watched as they methodically examined entry points, sight lines, and camera positions, making recommendations for improvements with the practiced efficiency of men who had spent decades protecting valuable assets. "Motion sensors here and here," said the older of the two, a former military police officer named Mac, pointing to areas where the tree line came closest to the barn. "Better cameras with night vision capability, and that side door needs reinforcement." The second man, Dave, nodded in agreement. "We can have it all installed by nightfall, but the best security is human presence. Someone should be with the horse at all times, preferably armed." Samuel agreed to all their suggestions, the previous night's close call having shattered any illusions about the lengths to which Caldwell might go. The cost was substantial, but Hayes had immediately offered to cover the security expenses when Samuel called to inform him of the attack. "Golden Spirit's safety is paramount," Hayes insisted, "not just for the documentary, but because what happened to him represents a grave injustice that needs to be exposed." While the security team worked, Walter arrived with Catherine Reynolds in tow. The veterinarian immediately went to check on Golden Spirit, concerned about the stress of the night's events on his health. "His heart rate is elevated, but otherwise he seems stable," she reported, running gentle hands along the horse's neck. "He's resilient, but we should minimize additional stressors." Walter pulled Samuel aside, his expression grave. "Brandon Hayes called me this morning. His team managed to track down Jenkins's widow. She's agreed to an interview, and what she's revealed is troubling." "What did she say?" "Jenkins received a visit from 2 men the day before he died, men matching the description of Caldwell's security personnel. According to Mrs. Jenkins, they had a heated argument in the barn. She couldn't hear what was said, but Jenkins was visibly shaken afterward." Samuel felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cool spring morning. "You think they threatened him? Or worse?" Walter's gaze was steady. "I think Jenkins may have known more about Golden Spirit's journey than he let on, and I think that knowledge may have cost him his life." The implication hung heavy between them. If Caldwell was willing to eliminate Jenkins to protect his secret, how much further would he go to silence the living evidence of his fraud? The answer came sooner than expected. Shortly after noon, as Samuel was helping Mac and Dave install motion sensors around the barn perimeter, his phone rang. The caller ID showed an unknown number. "Mr. Miller," a voice said without preamble, electronically distorted beyond recognition. "This is your only warning. Get rid of the horse. Sell it, donate it, we don't care. But if that animal is still on your property by this time tomorrow, what happened last night will seem like a friendly visit." The call disconnected before Samuel could respond. He stood motionless, the phone still pressed to his ear, as a cold rage replaced his initial shock. This was no longer just about protecting a horse or exposing fraud. It was about refusing to be intimidated by those who believed their wealth and power placed them above consequences. He relayed the threat to the security team, who immediately recommended contacting the sheriff again, Dave, the younger of the two guards, offered to stay at the farm overnight, providing an armed presence while Mac completed the security upgrades. "I'll stay too," Jim declared when informed of the latest development. "These bastards want to play hardball? They picked the wrong damn farm." Samuel called Hayes next, explaining the escalating situation. The filmmaker's response was immediate and unexpected. "I'm bringing the crew out now," Hayes said. "If they're threatening you directly, we need to document it. This is becoming bigger than just Golden Spirit's story. It's about corruption and intimidation at the highest levels of the racing industry." By late afternoon, Hayes and a small production team had arrived, setting up cameras around the property with Samuel's permission. Their presence added another layer of security. Would-be attackers might think twice about approaching a farm under constant video surveillance. As sunset approached, Samuel received another unexpected call, this one from Lily. "I'm on my way home," she announced, her tone brooking no argument. "I've spoken with my professors and arranged to complete my remaining assignments remotely. I'll be there by midnight." "Lily, it's not safe." "That's exactly why I'm coming," she cut him off. "You need me there, Dad. Golden Spirit needs me there. We're facing this together, remember?" Samuel couldn't help but smile despite his concerns. His daughter had inherited her mother's determination along with her gentle heart. "Drive carefully," was all he said. The evening brought an uneasy calm to the farm. Golden Spirit, perhaps sensing the protective presence surrounding him, seemed more relaxed than Samuel would have expected. Dave positioned himself in the barn, a thermos of coffee and a shotgun keeping him company, while Jim patrolled the perimeter, checking the newly installed motion sensors and cameras. Samuel sat on the porch with Blue, watching the stars emerge in the clearing sky. The peaceful scene belied the tension that had enveloped his life. How had a simple act of compassion, purchasing an unwanted horse at auction, led to threats and gunfire? The answer, he supposed, lay in the corruption that Golden Spirit's very existence exposed. A champion reduced to a discarded liability, a fraud worth millions that powerful men would kill to keep hidden. His phone rang again, Walter this time, with news that simultaneously clarified the situation and raised the stakes even higher. Hayes's team found the veterinarian who supposedly euthanized Golden Spirit, Walter explained. He's admitted to falsifying the death certificate, says he was paid $25,000 by Caldwell personally to sign off on it without ever seeing a horse. "So we have direct evidence linking Caldwell to the fraud," Samuel said. "Yes, and more." The vet kept records, dates, amounts, even recorded a phone conversation with Caldwell as insurance. He was afraid if the fraud was ever discovered, he'd be the scapegoat. Smart man. Indeed. Hayes is working with legal experts to determine the best way to proceed. This is now firmly in criminal territory. Wire fraud, insurance fraud, possibly even animal cruelty charges. After hanging up, Samuel informed Jim and Dave of this latest development. Both men agreed that the new evidence might make Caldwell even more desperate. A cornered predator was always more dangerous. Around 11, headlights appeared on the long driveway. Samuel tensed until he recognized Lily's small sedan approaching. She parked and rushed to embrace him, her face tight with worry, despite her obvious relief at seeing him. "I was so scared," she admitted, clinging to him for a moment before pulling back to look him over, as if confirming he was truly unharmed. "When you called about the attack..." "I'm fine," he assured her. "We all are. And now we have security measures in place." Lily's expression turned determined. "Where's Golden Spirit? I want to see him." They walked to the barn together, where Dave nodded a greeting from his position near the entrance. Golden Spirit was awake, his ears pricking forward at the sound of Lily's voice. She went to him immediately, murmuring soft reassurances as she stroked his neck. "We won't let anything happen to you," she promised, pressing her forehead against his. "You're home now, for good." The horse nickered softly in response, and Samuel felt a renewed sense of purpose watching them together. Whatever threats came, whatever danger Caldwell represented, they would face it united in their determination to protect this remarkable animal who had survived so much already. Midnight came and went without incident. Lily eventually returned to the house to sleep, while Samuel insisted on taking a shift in the barn to give Dave a break. He sat on a hay bale beside Golden Spirit's stall, shotgun across his knees, contemplating how profoundly his life had changed in the short time since the auction. The financial pressure that had once seemed insurmountable was now resolved, thanks to Hayes's documentary contract. The isolation he had wrapped around himself like a shield after Emma's death had been broken by new connections, with Walter, Catherine, even reconnecting with Lily in a deeper way. And at the center of it all was Golden Spirit, a being who had entered his life as a seemingly worthless cast-off and revealed himself to be a treasure beyond price. "You've changed everything," Samuel told the horse, who was dozing lightly in his stall. "For the better, even with all this trouble." Dawn was breaking when Samuel's phone vibrated with a text from Hayes. "Breakthrough, coming to the farm with news. ETA 9 a.m. The filmmaker arrived precisely at 9, accompanied by his producer Olivia and a man Samuel didn't recognize, middle-aged, professionally dressed, with the bearing of someone accustomed to authority. "Samuel, this is Agent Donovan from the FBI's Financial Crimes Division," Hayes introduced them. "He'd like to speak with you about Golden Spirit." The agent shook Samuel's hand firmly. "Mr. Miller, I understand you've had some trouble here recently." Samuel nodded, inviting them into the house where Lily was preparing breakfast. Jim and Dave joined them, along with Walter, who had arrived minutes earlier in response to Hayes's call. "We've been investigating Harrison Caldwell and Stonebridge Farms for several months," Agent Donovan explained once they were all seated. "Originally for tax evasion and possible money laundering. But Mr. Hayes contacted our office yesterday with evidence suggesting a much broader pattern of fraud involving falsified horse deaths and insurance claims." "Not just Golden Spirit?" Samuel asked. "No. We believe there were at least 7 other horses involved in similar schemes over the past decade. The total fraud could exceed $15 million. The magnitude was staggering. Golden Spirit wasn't an isolated case, but part of a systematic criminal enterprise. We're preparing to execute search warrants at Stonebridge Farms and several other locations," Donovan continued. "But I wanted to speak with you directly about Golden Spirit, as he represents physical evidence in this case." "What do you need from us?" Lily asked. "For now, continue to secure the horse. We'll arrange for additional protection until Caldwell is in custody. We'll also need documented proof of Golden Spirit's identity. Photographs, DNA testing if necessary, and testimony from experts like Mr. Crane here, who can positively identify him." Walter nodded his agreement. "I can arrange for DNA testing to match against samples from his racing days. Many top horses have their DNA stored." As they discussed logistics, Samuel felt a weight lifting. The threat wasn't over. Caldwell remained at large and dangerous. But now they had the full force of federal law enforcement behind them. Golden Spirit's story would be told, and those responsible for his mistreatment would face justice. After breakfast, Samuel walked Agent Donovan to the barn to meet Golden Spirit. The horse approached them with his characteristic dignity, seemingly understanding the importance of the moment. "Magnificent animal," Donovan commented, observing Golden Spirit with genuine appreciation. "Even after everything he's been through." "He's a survivor," Samuel said simply. "Just needed someone to see his worth." As Donovan departed with promises of additional security arriving soon, Samuel stood in the doorway of the barn, watching the FBI agent's car disappear down the driveway. The farm felt different somehow, no longer isolated and failing, but vibrant with purpose and connection. Golden Spirit appeared beside him, poking his head over the half door of his stall. Samuel stroked the horse's nose, a gesture that had become as natural as breathing. "We're almost there," he told the horse. "Almost home free." But as he spoke the words, Samuel couldn't shake the nagging certainty that Caldwell would make one final desperate move before justice could catch up to him. The question was when, and whether they would be ready when it came. The FBI security detail arrived by mid-afternoon. 2 agents in an unmarked SUV who established a position near the barn entrance. Their presence brought a measure of relief, though Samuel remained vigilant, the previous night's confrontation still fresh in his mind. Agent Donovan had been clear. Until Caldwell was in custody, Golden Spirit remained a target. The day passed without incident. Lily spent hours with Golden Spirit, brushing his coat until it gleamed in the afternoon sun, talking to him in low, soothing tones that seemed to resonate with the horse. Samuel watched them together, struck by how natural their bond appeared, as if Golden Spirit had always been part of their family. "He's different with you," Samuel observed, joining Lily by the paddock fence. "More relaxed." Lily smiled, her hand resting on the horse's neck. "He knows he's home." She glanced at her father, her expression turning serious. "This is going to work out, right? They're going to arrest Caldwell?" "Agent Donovan seemed confident," Samuel replied, though uncertainty lingered. In his experience, wealth and influence often shielded people like Harrison Caldwell from consequences. "The warrants should be executed tomorrow morning." As evening approached, Walter arrived with news that the DNA testing had been expedited. A sample from Golden Spirit would be compared against records from his racing days to provide irrefutable proof of his identity. The results would be available within 48 hours. "The legal machinery is finally moving," Walter said, his voice tired but satisfied. "Caldwell's empire is beginning to crumble. Several of his business associates have already contacted the FBI, looking to make deals." The information should have been reassuring, but Samuel couldn't shake his sense of foreboding. Cornered predators were unpredictable, and Caldwell had already demonstrated his willingness to use violence to protect his interests. Night fell, bringing a clear sky filled with stars. The FBI agents maintained their position, occasionally circling the property, their presence a deterrent to any would-be attackers. Dave and Jim continued their own security rounds, creating an overlapping web of protection around the farm. Samuel checked on Golden Spirit one last time before retiring to the house. The horse stood at the stall door, ears pricked forward, unusually alert for the late hour. "What is it, boy?" Samuel asked softly, placing a hand on Golden Spirit's nose. "Sensing something?" The horse snorted softly, his eyes fixed on something beyond Samuel's shoulder. Following the horse's gaze, Samuel saw nothing but shadows and the distant glow of the security lights. Still, Golden Spirit's unease was contagious. Samuel made a final circuit of the barn, checking locks and alarm systems before reluctantly heading to the house. Inside, Lily was sitting at the kitchen table, laptop open before her, surrounded by printouts and notes. "What's all this?" Samuel asked, pouring himself a cup of the coffee she'd made. "Research on Golden Spirit's racing career," she explained. "I'm helping Hayes organize the timeline for the documentary. Did you know Golden Spirit still holds the track record at Churchill Downs for his year? No one's beaten his time since." Samuel smiled at her enthusiasm. He was something special. "Still is," Lily corrected gently. "Different now, but still extraordinary." They stayed up late, Lily sharing her discoveries about Golden Spirit's glory days while Samuel listened, captivated by stories of the horse's remarkable achievements. It was well past midnight when they finally retired, both exhausted but strangely content despite the lingering threat. Samuel had just fallen into a restless sleep when a sharp bark from Blue jolted him awake. The dog was at the bedroom door, hackles raised, growling low in his throat, the same warning that had preceded the previous night's attack. Heart pounding, Samuel reached for his phone, pulling up the security camera feed. The night vision cameras showed the FBI agents alert and moving towards something at the perimeter of the property. Jim and Dave were also visible, weapons ready, converging on the same area. Samuel was pulling on his boots when a series of sharp pops echoed through the night, gunfire, distant but unmistakable. He rushed to Lily's room, finding her already awake and wide-eyed. "Stay here," he ordered. "Lock the door." "Dad, please, Lily, I need to know you're safe." She nodded reluctantly, and Samuel hurried downstairs, Blue at his heels. Outside, more gunshots punctuated the darkness, accompanied now by shouting voices. Through the kitchen window, Samuel could see flashlight beams cutting through the night, moving rapidly toward the barn. His phone rang. "Jim," his voice tense with urgency. "Sam, we've got multiple intruders. At least 4, maybe more. They're trying to reach the barn. FBI agents are engaging, but they need backup." Samuel grabbed his shotgun and headed toward the door, only to find Lily already there, her own rifle in hand. The determined set of her jaw told him arguing would be futile. "I know how to shoot, Dad. Mom made sure of that. I'm coming with you." Together, they moved cautiously toward the barn, using the shadows for cover. The gunfire had ceased, replaced by tense voices and the sound of approaching sirens. Local deputies responding to the FBI agent's call for assistance. As they neared the barn, a figure emerged from the shadows. One of the FBI agents, his arm bleeding from what appeared to be a grazing wound. "4 suspects," he reported grimly. "We've apprehended 2, but the others headed for the barn. My partner's in pursuit." Samuel felt a surge of panic. Golden Spirit was alone, vulnerable to whoever had breached the perimeter. "Lily, stay with him," he instructed, indicating the injured agent. "Get him to safety." Before she could protest, Samuel sprinted toward the barn, Blue racing ahead. The dog disappeared through the partially open door, his warning barks turning to aggressive growls within seconds. Samuel approached cautiously, shotgun ready. Inside, emergency lights cast eerie shadows across the straw-covered floor. Blue's growls emanated from near Golden Spirit's stall, where the horse was whinnying in distress. Steeling himself, Samuel entered, moving silently along the wall. The scene that greeted him sent ice through his veins. A man in dark clothing stood at Golden Spirit's stall, a syringe in one hand, while another figure, unmistakably Harrison Caldwell himself, watched from nearby. Blue was keeping them at bay, his teeth bared in threat. "That's enough," Samuel called, raising his shotgun. "Step away from the horse." Both men turned, startled by his voice. The man with the syringe recovered quickly, lunging toward Samuel with unexpected speed. Blue intercepted, latching onto the attacker's arm with powerful jaws. The man screamed, dropping the syringe, which shattered on the concrete floor. In the chaos, Caldwell made a desperate move, pulling a handgun from inside his jacket. "This ends now," he snarled, aiming not at Samuel, but at Golden Spirit. "If I can't have him, no one will." Samuel reacted without thinking, throwing himself forward as Caldwell squeezed the trigger. The gun's report was deafening in the enclosed space. Samuel felt a searing pain across his shoulder, but managed to tackle Caldwell to the ground, the gun skittering away across the floor. They struggled briefly, Caldwell fighting with the desperation of a man who knew his world was collapsing. Despite the pain in his shoulder, Samuel found strength in his rage at what this man had tried to do, not just to Golden Spirit, but to anyone who stood in the way of his greed. The barn door burst open again as the second FBI agent arrived, weapon drawn. "Federal agent, freeze!" The fight went out of Caldwell instantly. He went limp beneath Samuel, his expression shifting from rage to resignation as the agent secured his wrists with handcuffs. "Harrison Caldwell, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted destruction of evidence, and assault with a deadly weapon," the agent recited, pulling the defeated man to his feet. Samuel sat back on his heels, suddenly aware of the warm wetness spreading across his shirt. The bullet had grazed his shoulder, painful, but not life-threatening. Blue limped to his side, apparently injured in the scuffle, but alert and protective as ever. "Dad!" Lily's voice cut through the commotion as she rushed into the barn, followed by sheriff's deputies and the injured FBI agent. Her face paled at the sight of blood on his shirt. "You're hurt!" "It's not bad," Samuel assured her, though the pain suggested otherwise. "Golden Spirit?" They turned to the stall where the horse stood trembling but unharmed, his eyes wide with fear but fixed on Samuel as if making sure his human protector was all right. "He's okay," Lily confirmed, relief evident in her voice as paramedics arrived to tend to Samuel's wound. As the chaos subsided, with Caldwell and his accomplices secured in law enforcement vehicles and the immediate danger past, Samuel found himself sitting on a hay bale while a paramedic dressed his shoulder. Lily sat beside him, her hand in his, while Golden Spirit watched from his stall, gradually calming as the strangers departed and familiar faces remained. "It's over," Walter said, arriving in the aftermath to find his friends battered but victorious. "Caldwell's arrest, combined with the evidence we've gathered, ensures he'll face serious charges. Golden Spirit is safe now, truly safe." Samuel nodded, exhaustion settling into his bones as the adrenaline ebbed. He was going to kill him. After everything else, the fraud, the gelding, the abandonment, he was still willing to destroy such a magnificent creature to protect himself. "Some men value money and power above all else," Walter replied sadly. "But others," he looked meaningfully at Samuel, "value life and dignity, even when it comes at personal cost." Dawn was breaking as the last of the law enforcement vehicles departed, leaving the farm in a strange, exhausted peace. Samuel, his shoulder bandaged and arm in a sling, stood with Lily at the paddock fence, watching as Golden Spirit ventured cautiously into the morning light, his movements stiff but determined. "What happens now?" Lily asked, leaning against her father's good side. "Now," Samuel said, "we give him the life he deserves, peaceful, dignified, valued for who he is, rather than what he can do or earn." "And the documentary? We'll tell his story, not just the fraud and the rescue, but what he represents. The way our society often discards those who can no longer serve a profit motive." Samuel smiled as Golden Spirit approached the fence, nudging his hand for attention. "And maybe in some small way, we'll change how people think about value." 3 months later, the Miller farm had transformed. The documentary Golden Spirit from Champion to Castoff had premiered at a prestigious film festival to critical acclaim and widespread attention. The resulting publicity had brought not only financial security, but also a new purpose to the once struggling property. Samuel, with Lily's encouragement and Hayes's guidance, had established a small sanctuary for retired racehorses, animals that, like Golden Spirit, had been discarded once their racing or breeding days ended. A portion of the documentary's proceeds funded the operation, with additional support coming from racing fans and animal welfare organizations touched by Golden Spirit's story. Harrison Caldwell had been indicted on multiple federal charges, along with several accomplices. The investigation had uncovered a pattern of fraud spanning more than a decade, with Golden Spirit being just one of many victims. The case had sent shockwaves through the racing industry, prompting calls for reform and greater oversight. On a warm summer evening, Samuel sat on the porch watching Golden Spirit lead a small herd of rescued thoroughbreds across the green pasture that had once been a drought-stricken cornfield. The irrigation system now worked properly, fed by a new well that provided ample water even in the driest months. Lily, home for the summer break, joined him with 2 glasses of iced tea. "He looks happy, doesn't he?" she said, nodding toward Golden Spirit. "Like he knows this is where he belongs." Samuel nodded, taking the offered drink. He found his purpose again, not racing, not breeding, but showing the world that value isn't just about usefulness or profit. "Like you," Lily observed gently. "You found your purpose too." Samuel hadn't thought of it that way, but she was right. After Emma's death, he had withdrawn, seeing himself as little more than a caretaker for a failing farm. Golden Spirit had changed that, awakening something in him that had been dormant for too long, a sense of purpose, of fighting for something that mattered. As if sensing their attention, Golden Spirit broke away from the herd and trotted toward the fence, his gait still marked by the slight limp that would always remind them of his journey. But there was strength in his movement too, a dignified resilience that had survived abandonment, abuse, and the attempt on his life. He reached the fence and extended his neck, nickering softly in greeting. Samuel rose and walked to meet him, Lily following close behind. Together they stood with the horse that had changed everything, united by a bond forged in adversity and strengthened by shared purpose. "You know," Samuel said, stroking Golden Spirit's gleaming coat, "when I bought him at that auction, I thought I was saving him." "But?" Lily prompted, recognizing the reflective tone in her father's voice. Samuel smiled, meeting Golden Spirit's intelligent gaze. "But now I think perhaps it was the other way around all along." The horse nickered softly, as if in agreement, and in that moment, surrounded by the new life that had blossomed from one simple act of compassion, Samuel knew with absolute certainty that some treasures couldn't be measured in dollars and cents, only in the quiet moments of connection that gave life its deepest meaning.